Hello, everybody. The drinker is here, and welcome to the VIP lounge. This is one that I'm really excited about. It's been a while in the offing because it took a while to get it arranged with everyone's schedules and stuff. But I'm pleased that we were finally able to make it happen. The guy that I'm going to be bringing on tonight, he is a comic book writer, and honestly, it would be quicker for me to name the things that he hasn't worked on because he has done everything from the Justice League to Batman to Judge Dredd to Superman to all of the Marvel the Marvel universe. Basically, he's done Civil War, he's done Old Man Logan, he's done Wanted, he's done Kickass, he's done Kingsman. He's done basically everything, and he's a Scotsman as well, so that makes him doubly awesome. So I am very pleased tonight to be joined by Mark Millar. Hello, sir.
How you doing, drinker? Good to see you. It's funny,
cheers, man.
I watch you all the time. It's so weird being in here. I feel like I've stepped inside a telly. It's great.
No, it's surreal for me, man, as well. Like, you know, you're genuinely like one of the like iconic names in like the comic book industry. I mean, you know, even for a total novice like me, I will not pretend for a second that I'm an expert in comic books, but I have read some of your works, like, and I know of you, and yeah, it's great to be able to speak to you tonight, man.
Fantastic. Is this too much Scottish for people, though? That's what I worry about. You know, like, you need a human to translate what we're saying usually. Two guys together, it's going to sound like dolphins, isn't it?
I've had Count Dankula on, and there was plenty of Scottishness going on there, and I think people were able to understand it all right. So hopefully they'll be all right. They'll be all right, you know.
Because there was one guy I worked with who for 3 years had no idea what I was saying, nothing. and I found out in the worst possible way. It was when I was at DC, and I phoned this guy up and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to be late with a script. My uncle's dead, you know, and I've got his funeral and all that to go to." And he was like, "That's awesome." And I was like, "What?" And then I found out from somebody later, he said, "Look, he's no idea what you're saying because you talk too fast. And he just guesses and laughs now and then, you know." And I was like, "Oh, God," you know. So I like to check now. I always like to check.
No, I mean, I experienced this when I was younger because, like, you know, back when I was at uni, I was working in call centers and stuff just to get some drinking money going. And, you know, when you're speaking to people from all over the UK and when you've got that sort of broad central belt accent, they don't always get it. And so gradually I sort of learned to soften it a little bit to try and make it a little bit more understandable. And so I lost a little bit of my accent and it's never really come back. So mine's is a bit bland and generic in comparison.
No, but you're a Fifer, though, aren't you? You're sort of from that neck of the woods, you know, like the northeast, you know. So
I was going to say a proud Fifer, but nobody from Fife is really proud. I mean, we're here, you know.
You're just happy to be alive. Happy to be alive.
Yeah, you know, I've made it past 30, so I consider that an achievement for Fife. But yeah, man, and it's great, you know, a person like yourself, you know, you have, you know, done some of the great sort of comic book storylines of our time, you know, like Civil War and stuff. And you're a guy from Scotland, and it's great because you're dealing with all these American characters and stuff, like people from all over the world. And it's a funny thing, like being a writer from Scotland. I don't know if you ever encountered this, but there's almost like this expectation that you should be writing like some detective drama set on the streets of Edinburgh or something like that. Like it always has to be this homespun stuff that's like very much in your own backyard.
Yes.
And not all of us want to do that, you know, and it's great to see that it can be done. We can break out of that.
Well, I grew up loving America, you know, like especially the West Coast. I don't know what it's like in the East Coast, but the West Coast, there's a massive love affair. Same as Ireland, a love affair with the East Coast of America in particular, and then Hollywood and everything too. So as a wee boy, I had an American flag up in my room, and I loved Superman and Batman. Like, to me, America is where the superheroes lived. So I knew as soon as I was an adult, that's where I wanted to be working, see these guys.
Yeah. I don't blame you in the slightest, man. And I was very much the same. Like I grew up, you know, watching American action movies, and it was, you know, the big like all-conquering American heroes, like, you know, that would save the day and stuff. And it was great. It was just accepting. And for me, it always does away with this idea that like you've got to see yourself on screen. You know, you didn't see an alcoholic Scottish guy very often saving the day, but I was all right with that. You know, I didn't need it. I could just identify with these heroes anyway.
I would rather see R2-D2 than me. You know? You know, I don't know if you did this as a kid, but I did it, and so did all my pals, which is when you're running about playing, we spoke in American accents. Did you ever do that as well? Like, so
when we were doing action scenes.
a detective thing or an army thing or something, you'd be like,
Yeah.
get out of here. You'd hear all the kids talking like guys off TV shows. And my kids do that too. And I maybe it's that Scottish people don't spend enough time with their children, so they grew up.
And we're just looking for any excuse to dump them off on someone else, No, it was very much the same for me as a kid. Like, yeah, you'd be playing like with toy guns or whatever, and you'd shoot at somebody and be like, I'm hit, god damn it. It's just what you do, because it's what you saw on screen. You would emulate it, so it made sense.
It's kind of weird, isn't it? Because imagine we were doing it with French accents or something. Like, imagine you saw your kids playing and they always spoke in a French accent when they were playing it. Yeah. But somehow an American accent is kind of cool, isn't it? Yeah.
It's all right, yeah. But yeah, man, listen, with a career like yours, like I'm almost struggling to know where to start, because honestly, I was looking through your bibliography, and it goes on for pages after pages. You've done basically everything when it comes to comic books. But I mean, I guess the question I would ask initially is like, how did you get your start in it? Like, where did you go first of all?
It's all I can remember ever wanting to do, and what's really weird is I've got the evidence of me wanting to do this before my memory kicks in. Your memory kicks in about 5 or something. You can remember primary school, but I've got drawings of Superman and Batman from when I'm 3 or 4 that I can't remember doing. So I almost can't remember not wanting to do this. Like my brothers have hung on to these little comic books I made when I was about 5. So kind of like, I guess, Beckham with a football, it's one of those things. Like, there's nothing I wanted to do except this. So I just saw it as a given that this was the life I was going to lead, whether I get paid or not. I mean, I was ready to do it for nothing, as you do at the beginning. So I just, when I was 12, 13, I was sending submissions into Marvel and DC, what little money I had for stamps, and it was 5 days for something to get to New York. And then I'd sometimes phone them up and say, have you read my script? Like a maniac when I was 12 or 13. So I just saw myself biding my time when I was in school until I actually got to do this. I was bursting to do it.
No, it's great. I mean, obviously you've been able to make a little bit of a go of it over the years. It's worked out okay for you. But it's great when you get that, that impetus from an early age, and you just kind of know, like, I want to tell stories. I want to share this stuff with the world. And then to get that chance to actually do it, it must have felt fantastic. Like, particularly when you got your first, your first publishing deal, your first commission. That first little burst of success must have been awesome.
Actually, it didn't feel fantastic for about 11 years.
Really?
Because when you're starting out, you're struggling. It's really hard. So although I had sold a story, so at the time I was 18, 19, I was selling scripts, but I was just keeping my head above the water, and I was like doggy paddling for the first 10, 11 years, and nobody was really reading anything I was doing. Nobody was talking about it. And I kind of entered comics periodically as a 20-year boom, and then every other sort of 10 years a bust as well, And I came in just at the bust when everybody was losing their jobs in the 90s. So I really appreciated it whenever I did get my big break. It came March 2000, and I remember that feeling of something going up in sales instead of going down in sales. It was just that wee moment where I thought, okay, I don't have to worry the way I've been worried for the last decade. But yeah. I think, that 10,000 hours thing that you have to write or do anything for 10,000 hours to get good at it, whether you're a carpenter, a plumber, whatever, an actor or a writer. And I think that was my 10,000 hours, those 10 years. I was like slogging my guts out and sort of finding a voice and refining a craft, I guess.
No, I mean, it's I very much agree with that idea of like these things come gradually. You get that feel for your style, your storytelling techniques and stuff, and just experience of doing it, finding out what works and stuff. Like when I sort of did it, like I don't work in the comic industry, but I got like my first publishing deal from a novel, and I think I fell into that trap of thinking, this is it. I'm on my way now. It's fast track to being a millionaire. And it's not like that. It's like you get that little advance on your first book. Yeah. It might sell all right, probably not. And then you're kind of just back to where you were a little bit. It does. It takes a while. It really does.
It's funny. I'm in London quite a lot. The Netflix office is in London, and I'll pop in every couple of weeks. And like, I always passed this hotel that I remember staying in when I was 19. Like, I was doing an independent comic in the small company that was funding the comic, which I got like 240 quid for the first issue, you know. They put me up in a hotel for one night, and I'd never been put up in a hotel before, and I pass it all the time. And I always remember being in it thinking, like, I'm like Bruce Wayne, this is amazing. I'm like, I'm in a hotel, I've got a key for a hotel and all that, you know.
Yeah.
And nobody paid for me for the next 6 years to go in a hotel. You know, it was like, I thought that was it. That was like life had changed, and I'd one night in this hotel.
It's funny that you just think you're going to get. It's like you think you're on this elevator and it's just going to take you straight up, and it's more like a roller coaster. You're going to go up and down, and it's.
But that's good, you know, because I mean, what you don't want to be is 22 and peaking. You know, you got to take the knocks and learn from them and learn the tricks and who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, and everything. I mean, it's just part of the process, like anything else. You know, like whether you're in boot camp or you're in medical school or whatever, you know, like you're training. You know, the first big chunk of your career is training, and you're always learning. You know?
No, I like that idea as well. Like, I would hate to get to that point where I kind of feel like, I've kind of learned everything I can, and this is as good as it's going to get. You know, I would always want to think there's more, that you can refine it. You can find better ways of doing things. You just get a better style or whatever. Like, you'd never want to feel like you've peaked, I guess, as a writer. I mean, obviously people do, but you never want to get there.
I think you've always got to be in search of the perfect story, because you can always pick flaws in everything you've ever done. You know, so it's a bit like stand-up comedian pals of mine always say that every night they go out looking for the perfect gag or the perfect set, that they just kill it. And then if they get close to it, then it's an unobtainable search that will go on for their entire careers. And I think writing's got to be that. You know, you've always got to think, okay, the next story is going to be the best one I've ever done.
Yeah. But yeah, for you, like, as I understand it, like your sort of break initially came with doing 2000 AD or doing the Judge Dredd stuff, and then that was kind of during the 90s, and then that's when I think you then moved on to DC initially. Yeah. But yeah, you weren't there for that long, as I understand it. Like, you did, you did a couple of different things for those, like Justice League and that sort of thing, but then you kind of moved over to Marvel.
Well, I never did anything notable, you know. Like, I mean, I was doing loads of stuff. I was in the British independent scene. Then I was at DC. I was actually DC for about 7 years, but nothing of really any writing. No, I worked with some really good artists, but like, I just hadn't quite found my voice. You know, I didn't really know the story I wanted to tell yet. I was kind of trying different things out. And DC was actually the summit of my aspirations. Like, when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was write Superman or write Justice League or something, you know. So I thought, okay, if I get to do this, that's as good as it gets. You know, that's my vocation in life. And I got there, and it was actually not as much fun as I expected. Like, it was quite corporate, and it was so unlike me, you know. And I didn't really feel at home there. I actually felt like it was quite a bullying culture and everything. You know, there was like people in charge who were horrible to the people on the next level, who were horrible to the people below them. There's a lot of nice people there too, but there was a slight atmosphere of fear, and it wasn't really what I expected, like guys phoning you up and shouting at you and things like that, you know. So I was kind of like, I'm not enjoying this at all. And what was weird is I didn't grow up a Marvel fan. Like, I liked Marvel, but I loved DC. DC was my thing. And strangely, when I went to Marvel, I kind of get headhunted by Joe Quesada, who'd just become editor-in-chief of Marvel. And I just suddenly like found my people, you know. It was really weird. Like, and I think it's such an important thing in life is like, don't swim against the tide. You know, you're going to hate it. You're going to hate it every day. But as soon as I went into Marvel, I was like, okay, these guys get me, I get them. This is going to be fun. And we every day I was at Marvel for those 8 or 9 years. It was fun, brilliant. And you'll do your best work in that environment too.
It's interesting, just the difference then, I guess, between those two companies. And like you say, you know, DC's kind of got the more iconic heroes. You know, they've got Batman, they've got Superman, they've got Wonder Woman. Those are the ones that have got the real household name recognition. I imagine back then, you know, not many people would have known who Iron Man was.
No, not at all, no. But in a way, that was good, because DC had been bought by Warner Brothers in 1968. So it was more corporate. It was already part of the studio system, where Marvel was like the Wild West. You know, you walk in and like guys were having like hamburger eating competitions, you know, and people were putting bets down to see who could eat the most burgers and all that, you know. And every meeting ended with going out and getting absolutely rat-arsed, you know, like I would do Marvel meetings. I'd fly out on the Monday to New York from Scotland, and I would do 3 or 4 days where I genuinely didn't sleep. I was only in my maybe late 20s, early 30s, But I would just drink all night, till like 4 or 5 in the morning, and then maybe have a wee bit of breakfast and then maybe an hour's sleep or something, and then I would crash like a dead guy on the plane on this Thursday night heading home, But it was just pulling all-nighters, just having good fun. It was kind of what I dreamed working in comics would be like, and it was before Disney came marching in, like those Disney years were really fun because it was a company that was on the verge of bankruptcy whenever I came in, like there was rumors that people's checks were bouncing from Marvel, and they had sold the coffee machine and the they were really broke. But sometimes that's the most exciting time, like to actually go in somewhere when it's the Wild West means you can build a city, it's like it can be pretty cool. Whereas to go in when something's already a big corporate behemoth, it's a lot less fun.
So, I mean, when you were saying like, working at DC, people were like phoning you up and yelling at you and stuff. Like, what was the reasons behind all of that? Was it just deadlines? Was it crunch time, or
just stupid stuff? Like, I mean, I remember one of my pals. It wasn't me, but one of my pals was drawing Batman, and somebody phoned him up, was shouting at him about the length of Batman's ears. And they would have meetings about like the length of Batman's ears and stuff like that, So I mean, it was just really stupid stuff, and I remember just thinking these people are weird, like this is not what I expected. But like in Marvel, it was much more sort of fly by the seat of your pants. But like, I mean, I only get chewed out a couple of times, and I'm not the sort of person that would normally accept it. But I remember actually biting my lip and just saying nothing on the phone because I really needed the gig. I just had a baby and all this, and like. I was 28, just had a baby, and like I needed the cash. And I knew that if I spoke back, what little work I had was about to dry up. And I was like, I've got to get out of here. This place is a nightmare.
I mean, I guess this applies both to Marvel and to DC, really. But like one of the things that always just is so daunting about it for me is like you're coming into a company like this, right? You've got these characters that have been going by that point for about 50 years, Batman, Superman, that sort of thing. How do you even begin to get a grasp of the continuity behind it all and the lore and the backstories and everything to try and then craft your own stories out of that?
I think the best thing to do is ignore it. Like I think if you try and do a story that doesn't contradict a 1954 subplot, you're going to lose your mind, right? So like, I mean, the way I look at it is just trying to have fun with it. Think about the essence of what the thing is and tell the story about that. So what they did at Marvel, actually, I mean, I came into Marvel at just the best time. Like I just had one hit comic, I think, called The Authority, and that got me into Marvel. And they let me do what I wanted, but what they were doing at the time was they said that a lot of the titles weren't accessible to a mainstream audience, so they wanted to start them over again from scratch with no continuity. So they wanted the X-Men from scratch. My friend Brian Bendis was doing Spider-Man from scratch, but set in a contemporary world, kind of like a movie adaptation, really, just taking the idea of what it is and doing it for people who've never seen Spider-Man or X-Men or whatever before, or in my case later, the Avengers. And that was perfect for me because I could just take it to the essence of what Captain America or Thor or Iron Man was without having to read 60 years of backstories, or in the case of Marvel at that time, I think 40 years of backstory. Because I just struggled, I've no interest in being a librarian with this stuff. I like the Stan Lee thing where you just tell a story for now.
No, I guess that's every writer's dream, really, to be just given these characters and say like, okay, you go tell a Captain America story. Don't get too hung up on the backstory behind it or fitting it into the lore because we're just starting afresh or whatever. It's like perfect. I can do whatever I want. Great, because so many of those characters are just they're so fascinating, they're so iconic because they're so timeless. I think they're endlessly moldable.
The myth of them is so much more interesting to me than the technicalities. So the idea of Captain America frozen in 1945 and defrosted now is a very different kind of story. He wakes up now and the story becomes about that when we're telling this from scratch. Whereas I'd have to write, the 400th issue of Captain America would be really difficult. Iron Man now, like what would Tony Stark be now? He's a kind of Elon Musk type figure and everything. This was 20 years ago when I was doing it, so it was really interesting to actually kind of like just think, okay, if Stan was born when I was born, what would Stan and Jack Kirby do now, with this stuff? And I would say out of the entire history of comics, other than being the guys who created that stuff, it was the most fun job to possibly have because you got to recreate them. It had never really been done before. It was a tremendous responsibility, but it was a responsibility born out of desperation because the company had tried everything else. It wasn't really working out. And they rolled the dice this one last time as they were filing for Chapter 11 and got a bunch of idiots who were kind of cheap enough, who they let do what they wanted. And it luckily worked out. You know?
It's mind-boggling now when you think the insane amounts of money that Marvel must be making.
Yeah.
Not necessarily from comic books, but like just from combined like movies and everything.
Yeah.
To think that they were once really struggling, and they had to let go of their coffee machines and stuff. You know, it's baffling to think that they were that hard up. You know, and I guess that's when you had those awful deals that I guess they regret now, where they sold the rights for things like Spider-Man and things like that to you know, make a bit of money. And it's like they're still
above the water. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy, but it's inspirational for people at the same time. You know, if even Marvel was on the verge of going under, and I think Fortune magazine had them as the business success story of 2002. So within 2 years, they turned everything around. And by the time you're getting to 2007, 2008, there's all these rumors about Paramount buying them, and then eventually Disney did buy them. And I remember the stock price had gone, I can't remember exactly, but I think it was about just under $2 a share. And then it dropped down to about $1 a share or thereabouts whenever we came in. And I think it was about maybe $55, $56 a share, you know, by the time, you know, and I never bought one share, nothing, which is crazy. But pals of mine did. Pals of mine made an absolute killer. And that, but $56 was just nuts when Disney came in. But I thought that was time for me to go, because I think there's some guys who operate in the Wild West, and then there's some guys who operate in Wall Street, you know, and I'm the Wild West guy, you know. So I saw Disney come in, and there was all these emails, you know, going around the company where they were like, "Great news, Disney's buying us. It's going to be amazing." And I was like, "This is like the mayor of Paris saying, great news, the Germans are
they've come to liberate us.
Some new friends," you know." So I was like, I don't know, I don't think I'm going to fit in here. Yeah.
I was going to say as well, like, because, you know, I've touched a little bit on the movie side of things, but back in that early 2000s period, that I guess was when you got your first X-Men movies, and they really set the template. I've always seen the X-Men series as, like, in film, as being like a kind of prototype for the MCU. It wasn't as slick, it wasn't as well thought out, it definitely wasn't as well planned, but it proved that it could be done. You know, you had Spider-Man, you know, those initial movies with Sam Raimi. You had the X-Men. Both of those things came around in the early 2000s, and that kind of jump-started that comic book movie adaptation phase and proved that it could work and it could be financially successful. Like, I guess because technology had gotten to the point where you could actually make it look good.
Yes.
What did that do to the comic book side of things? Did it like reinvigorate it, or was it just business as usual for you guys?
Actually, there's a movie everyone forgets was as pivotal, if not more so, that really did kickstart this, but has been sort of memory hold a little bit in terms of when it came out, which is Blade. The first Blade movie actually predates. I
love Blade.
Blade's amazing, right? And by about 18 months, and it actually really set the template because it was a comic book movie for normal people. You know, because you have to remember, Blade came about 2 years after Batman and Robin and Shaq playing Steel and things like that. You know,
Steel, yeah.
You know, like absolute crap. And I was a guy who loved these things, and I would always show up with hope in my heart. You know, like I'd show up on the first day of Steel or the first day of Batman and Robin thinking, maybe this isn't as bad as it looks. I have a feeling this is going to be pretty good. And then you come out brokenhearted, you know. And you know, and Blade was the first time I remember sitting with pals and we were looking around at each other going, this is amazing, you know. Like, so David Goyer is a guy who doesn't get anything like the credit he deserves. Like, David Goyer, I think, had been trying to get this kind of thing going for a long time, like realizing the mainstream potential in comic book movies. And he got Blade off the ground, and obviously pivotal in Batman and, you know, tons of other stuff as well. He was kind of the guy for that decade when those things were very new and very cool. But you're right, though. I mean, the first time an outright superhero thing that people realized was based in a comic is X-Men. And there was a really weird moment, actually. I remember going to see X-Men in San Diego in 2000 with a bunch of pals. And we walked out like 10 feet tall. We were kind of like, you guys, you've all been laughing at us for 20 years, you know, all that, you know, but now we're here, you know, like people understand what's cool about this stuff, because, you know, really most comic book movies until that point have been terrible. You know, Richard Donner's Superman's a masterpiece. You know, Tim Burton's first 2 Batman films are great and everything, but generally speaking, these things were done by journeymen instead of auteurs, you know, and you had this guy who'd done The Usual Suspects suddenly doing a comic book movie. It gave it a legitimacy, and that was followed up by Sam Raimi coming in, and you're hearing about Ang Lee coming and Christopher Nolan. I actually think that was a more important decade than the past decade that we've had, you know, like this 22-year sort of comic book phase. I think the first decade was actually more interesting because I think the auteurs were in there. It was the guys who really made this happen, and I think we're back to the journeyman a little bit, you know.
Yeah, it's a really interesting shift that happened, and like clearly what they have now is like a well-oiled machine. They understand the formula, they know what works, and they just keep churning them out. And like, you know, I've talked about this quite a bit. But that early 2000s period was interesting because they were really having to take a punt on all of these movies. They didn't know if they were going to work, and they hadn't figured out the formula yet. They hadn't quite realized what was going to work. They didn't know if the technology like CGI was going to be able to keep up with what they wanted to do. But it was interesting. Like it was rough, and it was a little bit you know, a diamond in the rough kind of thing. But like the trail was blazed in that period, and I think it's a really interesting time for comic book movies. And you know, it led, I guess, ultimately to the first Iron Man movie, which I genuinely hold up still as one of the best Marvel movies that they've ever done. Like I could watch Iron Man anytime and just enjoy it. It's great.
Iron Man's a perfect movie. I worked on it a little bit. I was out, and I remember nobody knew if this was going to work. Like, for starters, Robert Downey Jr. had just been hired, who was regarded as a risk. They wanted Clive Owen for the part originally, which would have been a very different character. And Jon Favreau, to his credit, really pushed for Downey Jr. You know, he was like, this guy is Tony Stark. This is who we need, you know, for the kind of character we're building here. But I remember people saying Marvel had borrowed a chunk of money to make these films, and they were making The Incredible Hulk and they were making Iron Man. And if they didn't work, that was it. You know, so they built up this goodwill and capital and everything from the fact Spider-Man and X-Men and everything had gone so well. And they were kind of like, okay, we're going to roll the dice big time here. If this doesn't work out, though, that's it, you know. And we hope to do Thor and Captain America and build up towards the Avengers. But if Iron Man hadn't worked, I really genuinely think that would have been it. And it's such a great film. I watched it again with the children last summer for the first time in years. And I was actually quite shocked. You know, there was a cultural shift around about 2010, 2011. And Marvel movies became a little bit more fluffy, you know, a little bit lighter and everything. But this felt like a proper movie. You know, this was made by a proper director, and it was genuine performances, and really funny. It was like actually funny instead of that kind of cutesy humor. You know, I love it. It's a great film.
I think so much of it came down to Robert Downey Jr. Like the dude just like radiates charisma, and it's like he was just born to play that role. Like he's so at ease with it, and it's, you know, a lot of the time when you see actors playing a character for the first time, you can tell they're a little bit like, you know, uncomfortable. They haven't quite figured it out yet. But it's like he just slipped straight into the role of Tony Stark. It's like didn't need any prep. He was just there. He was Tony right away. Got the character perfectly right off the bat. And he's just great fun to watch. Like, and it's so enjoyable because it's a film that really takes the time to show him learning how to be Iron Man. Like he's developing the suits, he's developing all the technology. He struggles, he makes mistakes. You know, he overcomes them and gradually gets better and refines what he does. It's all time consuming, but it works because you're really invested in what he's doing. And I think it's just such a perfect archetypal superhero movie where everything is just perfectly paced. It looks great. Like even now, the special effects, totally fine. For a movie made in 2008, no problems with it. It's great.
I'm never bothered by, you know, the effects not being perfect and all that. You know, like I'd rather have a good movie with okay effects than a crap movie with $500 million budget.
No, I agree 100%. But I think it's just impressive because the fact that it was the first one, they were taking a bit of a risk on it. You know, they perhaps didn't have the crazy budgets that they have nowadays, but it still looks fantastic despite all of that, you know, and I think that's to its credit, you know. And
Iron Man 2, I've only watched Iron Man 2 once. I've never watched it again, but I remember not loving it at the time, you know, but like
I don't think it's well regarded, but I've got a soft spot for it because I think Tony goes on a good arc with it. you know, the fact that he's got the sort of poisoning, and he's trying to face up to his own mortality potentially, because this arc reactor in his chest could ultimately kill him. I don't think Whiplash was a great villain. I don't know much about the comic book version of him, but he just felt a bit like bland and a bit weak, and it felt like it was a bit of a waste of whatever his name was. Yeah.
All the ingredients were there for that film. It was an amazing cast, like Sam Rockwell and everybody, but maybe that anticipation was too high and everything, you know. But like, I remember being a wee bit disappointed. But they seemed to struggle with their second movies a bit. Like Thor 2 wasn't very good, you know. Like
I think they were probably, I guess, the weakness that I've always found with the Marvel movies is the villains. Because you can tell they're saving the good ones for the Avengers movies, and so what you tend to get is the you know, the B team for you know, these solo standalone films, and they're just not very interesting. Like when I think about Iron Man 3, I think it was like, was it Killian or something like that? Guy Pearce was playing him. He was just a shit villain. Like, he wasn't interesting. His motivations were pretty bland. His powers weren't that good. You know, they really needed someone more interesting. I think the Mandarin was such a waste, because they could have done something really cool with him, but they made him into a joke because, I guess.
Although it was quite funny. I thought that wee subversion thing, I thought was a kind of good gag, but I know what you mean as well at the same time. I didn't see that coming, which I thought was quite cool. My favourite thing in Iron Man 3 was the Shane Black dialogue, you know, the interplay between, you know, Tony and the kids. All that stuff.
Yeah, that was good.
Great, wasn't it? I mean, that was pure Shane Black, which it felt like a Shane Black movie for that stuff. It was even set at Christmas.
Shane Black loves his Christmas. But he's a funny one, because he's definitely got the knack for witty dialogue, good like back and forth and stuff, and he knows how to do a good sort of action thriller. But then he's done stuff like The Predator, which was pretty shit. I'm not gonna lie. He was trying to bring humor into something that shouldn't be humorous, you know, and that just felt like really out of place and weird.
Yeah. Do you do that thing I do though, where like, I'm a real purist when it comes to my DVDs. Like, I mean, like all, you know, guys like us, I've got my collections, you know, I've got my comics, I've got my DVDs, all that kind of stuff. And I actually don't complete sets of things I don't like. You know, so what I do is, if something looks crap, it doesn't win my collection. So for me, like, The Matrix is one film, Indiana Jones is 3 films, Superman is 2 films, you know. Like,
why support stuff that's not good? You know what I mean? Like, as far as I'm concerned, there's 2 Predator movies been made, 1 and 2. There's 2 Alien movies been made, and there's 2 Terminator movies been made. And that I'm perfectly comfortable with that. You know?
But I love looking at my shelves because I feel so inspired. Like, every comic I have is something I really love, and like every DVD in my shelf, I'm like, God, Hollywood is awesome. Like, these movies are fantastic, because I don't keep the rubbish ones. You know, I just don't even think about it. They're gone, because they're the opposite of inspirational. You know, so just keep the stuff around you that's great. I think.
I was going to say as well, like, you've obviously had a lot of your stuff adapted to film. You know, you've written some like a little obscure thing called Civil War that a few people might have heard of. You know, it's only like one of the biggest crossovers of all time. But that obviously got made into Captain America: Civil War, and I know that they condensed down a lot of the complexities of it to make it fit within the context of a movie, but still regarded as one of the best Marvel films ever made. And you must have a fair bit of pride knowing that came from your source material.
Do you know what? It's funny. My whole period at Marvel, you know, in some sort of level, has ended up as something. Like, probably actually the one that you use most would be, I did a book called The Ultimates with a great artist called Brian Hitch 20 years ago, whenever we were first brought into Marvel. And a lot of that was used for the Avengers, the first Avengers movie. You know, it's kind of the template for the first Avengers movie, right down to Sam Jackson as Nick Fury, as Brian drew him, you know, as, you know, so all these things we created, like the Triskelion as the headquarters for the Avengers and all this kind of stuff, you know, all that stuff's sort of in the Ultimates. But we were just trying to kind of make a living in comics. You know, we never assumed any of this stuff was going to become films. That all happened later. So we were like, let's try and keep the comic industry going, and let's keep a job if we possibly can. So we were delighted to be getting paid for what we were loving doing. It was really exciting. So then to see it later becoming films in various forms, you know, was great. You know, like on some level, Old Man Logan, you know, became a movie about an older Wolverine. You know, with Logan, it was you know, so little things were happening like that at Marvel. And Stan Lee pointed it out to me because he knew that they were using the Ultimates as a bit of a source for what was going to eventually become the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And he said to me, God, 18, 19 years ago, you know, 19 years ago, he said, listen, I feel as if you'd be quite good at creating your own stuff. You should go off and do your own thing. Don't do everything at Marvel. You know, you want to own this stuff. He said, if I was your age, I'd be out there like doing what I did in the 60s. You know, like if he and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko could have owned Spider-Man and, you know, owned Iron Man, owned the Avengers and everything, Fantastic Four, it would have been incredible, you know. So whereas my generation of guys have got that opportunity to do it. So that's what made me go off and do Millerworld. I realized it'd be crazy just to have Marvel adapt all these things. You've got to go off and do your own.
No, I think so. And it, like, I guess when you get to that certain stage, like of success and your career and recognition and stuff, like maybe it is time to then think about branching out and doing it yourself. But like a lot of people wouldn't have the guts to do that because it'd be easier to take that safe gig and just, you know, it's like, I'll just stay within this big corporation because I'm protected then and stuff. But you kind of did that and took the leap. And like, yeah, that's how you ended up with the Millerverse now. And it's huge now. Like you've got like an absolute ton of stuff from that.
I think there's about 24 franchises. When we sold the company to Netflix, you know, we sold it the way Disney was sold to Marvel. I'll never own the company again. It's owned by Netflix, and in part of selling it, I had to come on staff and run Millerworld, you know, for a certain number of years. But you know, that was back in 2017, and I knew I wanted to do 2 or 3 projects, but once I got started, it suddenly became like over a dozen, and then by the time we sold, there was 17 projects, and then eventually now I think 24 we're sitting at. But I can't stop. It's like being perpetually pregnant. I love it. You know, it's all these franchises keep popping out. You know, it's great. So I mean we're living in a brilliant time where you can do this stuff, because if I'd been born 20 years earlier, I'd be lucky to make a living still working at Marvel or at DC or whatever. You know, I wouldn't have this opportunity where you can own your own material like this.
No, it's a good problem to have, I think, to be like, oh man, I've got so many ideas, I just don't have enough time to write them all down. You know, like you don't want to have the opposite problem where it's like, oh shit, what do I do now? I've got no clue. So that's a good position to be in, and especially, you know, having been in the industry for so long, still be brimming with ideas and sort of passionate about what you're doing. That's a great situation to be in, you know.
Well, I do genuinely love it. Like I said, it's what I wanted to do when I was a kid. So it's a bit like, you know, when you're wee, you say, I'll be a footballer or an astronaut or something. This is like getting to be the astronaut. You know, this is what you wanted to do when you were a kid. So there's never a day that I don't think this is fantastic. You know, like when I switch on my computer in the morning, I'm genuinely delighted to be sitting down doing it. And I never planned to work in movies, you know, but like I say, when I, you know, started my own stuff, I then became a producer on the projects, then got more involved with the production side of it. So then it felt quite natural when we sold the company to take the in-house job at Netflix on top of this as well. So I spend half my day writing now and the other half of the day reading other people's scripts and, you know, giving annoying notes.
Yeah. Is there going to be a King of Spies show on Netflix?
That's the plan. I mean, we've you know, one of my absolute favorite writers, they haven't announced it yet, you know, but one of my absolute favorite writers has been doing it as a series. I'd written it actually as a movie. I'd planned it as a movie, but the idea would be like a 6-part series, because there's quite a lot of depth to it that they could dig into. But King of Spies would be a beauty, I think, and Pierce Brosnan is the dream casting for it too, isn't he? He's just the perfect age.
He is, yeah. I could totally see him doing that.
And there's a 90s revival, isn't there? I mean, after Top Gun, you know, like, you feel really good about guys you used to feel really good about. You remember how much you love Tom Cruise. So like Kevin Costner in Yellowstone, Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, this is a funny kind of situation we're in at the moment, right? And I know this is more in the movie realm than comic books, but it feels like there's a bit of a shift going on.
Total shift, yeah.
It's been, I'm not, you know, you've seen my YouTube channel, and I've made my feelings clear. Like, it's been pretty fucking dire over the past few years about, you know, movies. It feels like there's been a real drive to kind of deconstruct, you know, traditional heroes and the ones that we used to look up to, whether it's in things like Star Wars, Star Trek, all these different franchises, you know, they've all been kind of broken down in their own way. Trying to use them as like a kind of launch pad for the new generation of characters that they're trying to launch now, who are younger and cheaper and easier to control and stuff. And it's depressing to see, and it's not it's not a great experience for the audience. But then you get things like Top Gun Maverick, which we've covered, or I've covered certainly on my channel, which was just like, hey, this hero that you enjoyed 30 odd years ago or whatever, you know what? He's still kicking ass and he's still awesome at what he does, and he's a little bit older now, but that's okay, you know. And there's a value in having age and experience and wisdom that's hard fought. And you come out of that movie feeling good. You know, it's like I've enjoyed that. Like they told a good story. They paid tribute to the past, but they didn't wallow in it. And there are younger characters who are respectable as well, but it shows they've got something to learn from the previous generation. I think that's a really good message to give to people.
But you've got to remember, though, the way I look at it is everything's a cycle. You know, and I remember 10 years ago when they talked about doing Top Gun as a sequel. I think at first I heard about it was about 2010. Everybody groaned. Everybody was like, oh, and it just hadn't been long enough, you know, but it hit at just exactly the right time. And I think if it had been made 5 years earlier, it would have been a very different kind of movie. I don't think it would have, it'd have been some really, you know, like ham-fisted politics shoved into it and everything, you know, whereas it was just the right time and it was at the paradigm shift. You know, when things are actually culturally changing, you can smell it in the air. Like the last few months, you can feel Hollywood is different. You know, like any single hero Marvel movie isn't making as much as Tom Cruise and Top Gun. You know, like so there's something in the air. Something is happening. Everybody is talking about Top Gun. I've been at all these barbecues ever since Top Gun came out every weekend. You know, just being a dad, I've been at school things. You know, and all the normie dads are all coming up to me and saying, "Have you seen Top Gun?" You know, like everybody's loving it. You know, their eyes are like glowing the way ours were after X-Men, and you just there's something afoot. But I also at the same time I'm kind of forgiving of ruining our childhood loves as well at the same time, and I'll tell you why. Right, this is weird because I love this stuff more than anyone. Right, I mean I've devoted my entire life to it. I love Superman, Star Wars, all these things more than anything. But sometimes I think we need a reminder that we have to move on and do new things. You know, we have to create new cultural icons. Like, for example, imagine George Lucas had got the rights to Flash Gordon and didn't do Star Wars. He would have just rehashed Flash Gordon, something that we had seen before. But he gave us something that we hadn't seen before. He gave us something new that lasted for a generation. But maybe that belongs in 1977 to 1983, and it's always there for us. And it's a masterpiece. Those three movies are an actual work of genius. You know, they're masterpieces. But they're always going to be there. The way Casablanca is always going to be there, or Easy Rider is going to be there. They belong in their period. And maybe the mistake we make is to carry them into middle age with us. You know, things that we love. We should carry them in our hearts, but maybe not be writing Godfather Part 12. You know, like these things just belong in their period, and that's what makes them so beautiful. And maybe these people have to come and ruin these things that we love so that we all then say, okay, well, here we have to do something different for this generation.
I think I come down on the side of like either, you know, if you're going to utilize these old characters, you know, from Star Wars or whatever it is, pay them respect. And so treat them good, treat them respectfully, and make it a dignified passing of the torch from one generation to the next. You know, that's what I would love to see ideally. Or just don't do it at all. So when it came to the new Star Wars trilogy, rather than what they did, I would almost rather they just didn't bring in anyone from the original movies. Don't bring in Luke. Don't bring in Han. Pretend that they've died, or like set it in a time period that's far enough in the future that like they're no longer even you know, relevant anymore, and do it that way. But what they tried to do, and this is really what it feels like, is like they wanted to bank on the audience recognition of those old characters and say, hey, you liked Luke, you liked Han, they were cool, we're going to bring them back, you get to see them again. But like use it as a Trojan horse to be like, yeah, well, actually they weren't that cool to begin with, and they're now just sad, depressed old men or whatever, and we're going to kill them off. And now you're going to like the new characters we've created, god damn it, because that's what we're telling you. That's, I think, what so many people had an issue with. It was this destruction of the past rather than a dignified passing of the torch.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a better version of it, but at the same time, I must admit, I did love the first one. I've got to say, I went to see The Force Awakens, and I was quite blown away. I've got to say, I loved it. And then when you see Mark Hamill at the end, you think, "Oh my God, this is going to get even better." and I remember, can I show off for 1 second? Because one of the reasons I think it was so awesome, Mark Hamill brought me along as his guest to the premiere of Force Awakens, right? And I was sitting with Mark, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and everybody, right? And it was like the best night of my life, right? So I remember coming out of it just really buzzing. It was fantastic. And I was so excited for Mark, who I love. He was in Kingsman and everything, And I've loved him my whole life. I had a poster of him on my wall when I was 7. So that anticipation for me for the next one was huge. But then I found by the last one, by episode 9, or I can't even remember what it was called, right? What was the last one called?
Rise of Skywalker.
We walked out halfway through it. And if you'd told me when I was 7, I would be walking out of a Star Wars movie. Like my wife and I had a babysitter right till midnight, and the plan was we were going to go and see Star Wars and then go to the pub. And about halfway through it, I said to her, if we leave now, we can get 2 more drinks in. Like,
that's the story.
And he agreed. Right, yeah. So I mean, it was amazing. I was shattered in the same way you were as well. Like the last one was awful. But at the same time, nobody ever tries to make a rubbish film. I think because I've seen it on the other side of it, like I've sat in these meetings and everybody been like, this is the best thing ever, And Hollywood's like the stock market. People just put money where the heat is and where they think the heat is and where they anticipate the heat's going to be. And sometimes they're wrong. So they calculate a plan and they think this is going to be perfect, And they really hope for the best. And nobody's a bad guy, but sometimes it just sucks. That's just what happens.
I don't doubt it. Like I'm sure everyone goes into it expecting that they're going to make a great film or hoping for that. But yeah, like there's times when I genuinely question, like, what was your thought process behind this? And like for me, I was relatively content with Force Awakens at the time because I didn't think too deeply into it. It was like, okay, it's setting up some interesting mysteries and stuff.
Yeah,
it's J.J. Abrams with his mystery box. There's a bunch of interesting stuff coming. Just trust us. There'll be great revelations to come. And it was like, okay, fine. It was pretty slick, and I think everyone was, the prequels that George Lucas had done hadn't been awesome, and I think there was a desire for something a bit slicker and a bit faster paced, and he definitely delivered that.
Yeah.
And the assumption was, okay, the movie number 2 is going to answer some of these questions. It's going to give us some revelations to this mystery. And then they brought in a completely different director and a completely different writer. Like he was doing everything. And Rian Johnson just kind of shut the bed, I guess, with his story. And as a writer myself, I'm baffled by the idea that you're going to kill off your main antagonist. You're going to close off so many of your major plot lines. So there's essentially nothing to build off for your final movie in your trilogy. Like, you shouldn't be doing stuff like this in the middle movie of a trilogy. And then when it came to Rise of Skywalker, I didn't have any strong opinions about it because I was just checked out by that point. I thought, I don't care. I don't care about this anymore. Whatever they're going to do is J.J. Abrams is just going to be trying to pick up the pieces, and there's nothing to work with. And so you can almost imagine it from his point of view. It's like, shit, man, like our big bad guy is dead. We've got Kylo Ren, who's just a kind of in between. He's not really good or bad. I don't really know what he is. Rey's already kicked his ass like 100 times already. Don't know what I can do with her. What's left? The Emperor. I know, the Emperor from the original movies. Let's just bring him back. Isn't he dead? Don't care. He's alive now. That's fine.
I was gone by then, but for me, it's funny. Like, I don't know about you, but I was writing the Star Wars, this trilogy in my head, of what was possibly coming, And whenever I saw Luke at the end of the first one, I was like, oh my God, it's going to be like Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven, where Luke hasn't picked up.
That would be great.
He hasn't picked up a lightsaber in 30 years, but Rey's going to be in big trouble. And he's going to pick up that lightsaber and he's going to take down 100 AT-ATs or something like that. And then he's going to gather a team at the end of the second one, and it's going to be amazing in the third one when he gets everybody together, And it didn't, you've got all these sort of thoughts of how you hope it's going to be. But I don't know, the other side of it is then what you do is you come out of it and you think, well, you know, Star Wars maybe isn't for me anymore. You know, I'm maybe going to create a new franchise that maybe becomes the next big thing like that. You know, like I can only see the positive in these things. That I'm not into Boba Fett or any of these Star Wars shows. I mean, every day there's a new Star Wars show being announced. You know, it's like
I was going to ask your opinion on this, man. Honestly, I did a stream with Az from Heel versus Babyface. He's like another YouTuber, and he read out to me all the different Marvel and Star Wars TV shows.
I saw that one. It was hilarious.
Lined up, and I just I died inside as he was, because it went on for about 5 minutes. It was just endless, and I was like, "Why is this being done? This is just content for content's sake." And I assume you, as a writer, you wouldn't want to tell a story unless there was a good, worthy story that's worth telling. But
Star Wars isn't a universe. You know, like Star Wars isn't a universe. Like for me, we're one step away from seeing a movie about the guys playing the clarinets in the Tatooine bar, aren't we? You know, it's like
we're absolutely going to get it. Like we're going to get like fucking cheers in the cantina.
That sounds all right, actually. That sounds not bad. That sounds okay. But I just think like Star Wars isn't a universe. It's like there was two big families in the 70s. There was the Corleones and there was the Skywalkers, you know. And if you tell a Godfather story about Luca Brasi, you know, a trilogy about Luca Brasi, I don't care. I just want to see the Corleones. And it's the same with the Skywalkers. I want to see the Skywalker family, and that's the end of Star Wars. For me, that's it. That's the limit of my interest. It's not such a fascinating universe that I need to see what's happening in this other planet, you know? I'd rather just see something else.
I think the low point for me was when they brought back Boba Fett. And, you know, it was all based on this idea that, like, oh, you remember Boba Fett from the original trilogy? He was kind of cool, wasn't he? He was a bit mysterious. Just this cool little bounty hunter. You know, he was in a few scenes, and that's it. Now he's got his entire TV show, and he's like a sort of tubby, like, elderly man. And he's like not very good at what he does anymore, and we're just going to show him walking around places and getting ambushed and just, you know, walking into all kinds of problems. How is that helping anyone? What is that achieving? That is just content.
Baby Yoda, though. Baby Yoda is cool. I must admit, I do like Baby Yoda.
So everyone likes Baby Yoda. Yeah,
we watch the Baby Yoda bits. Like we do like the Baby Yoda bits. And like my 8-year-old, she's like my 10-year-old is like a clone of me. It's crazy, you know. She reads like 1950s Superman comics and stuff like that, you know. But like, but my 8-year-old just likes animals and all that kind of stuff. She's not into geek stuff at all, but she loves Baby Yoda, and I love that we've got that wee connection to Star Wars, that she does like Baby Yoda. So I forgive it for that, you know.
I mean, he's cute looking. You know, you can't help but like him. It's definitely, that's going to be a winner.
The design is brilliant. It's a great design, and you know they just do that well. Like, I mean, it's the only thing. We just fast forward through all the other bits and watch the Baby Yoda stuff, you know. Yeah. But I mean, again, Star Wars for me is 3 movies on my shelf, and they're awesome. You know, they're not even those crappy kind of 90s cuts, you know, where they put the CGI in them and all that. You know, the proper Star Wars have got three Star Wars movies, and they're great. You know?
I don't know how you feel about this. I've got such a soft spot for movies that use miniatures, and so like if you say you've got like a spaceship that gets blown up, it's like it'll have pyrotechnics inside the model, and it just on screen. I love all that. I love that so much more than CGI.
Oh, like Colin Chilvers type stuff and everything, or the obviously Ray Harryhausen's like the master with these things. And what I always feel about that stuff is one of my favorite movies is Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. You know, the Ray Harryhausen film. Yeah, and like I really feel when I see his stop motion animation that a wizard has made this happen. It feels mystical. It feels weird when you see some wee creepy thing moving about that he's created. Whereas CGI, I feel a bunch of guys have done it in a room on their computer, but I feel Ray Harryhausen has a wizard to bring these guys to life. You know? Yeah, I love all that stuff.
It's like in oh man, what was it called? Jason and the Argonauts, when you got Talos, the big giant like steel man who walks around the island. That guy's fucking terrifying because he's kind of jerky in the way he moves, and it's just so unnatural looking. But like it's so well done. You know, I love that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Did you go and see the exhibition in Edinburgh where they had Talos?
Yeah,
Talos is like that size. It's crazy.
He's small. Yeah,
it's tiny.
No, it's so cool. Like for anyone watching, like the Ray Harryhausen, that they've done an exhibition in Edinburgh where it's like all the puppets and everything that he used for his stop motion animation. So like Medusa from Clash of the Titans and stuff like that. You get to see all the props there, and it's really interesting to see how it's all done, how it was all put together, because he kind of pioneered a lot of like special effects techniques before CGI was ever a thing, obviously. You know, like using multiple screens and stuff to give you that layered background with like monsters and stuff in the background. It was so clever how they did it. But yeah,
he became so famous as well. You know, like he was a household name. Like if any kid in school knew who Ray Harryhausen was, which is quite weird, isn't it? You know, that he was a brand name. Like if you heard it was a Ray Harryhausen movie, you were like, oh, that sounds good. You know?
Yeah. No, I love it. I was going to ask you as well, like obviously, with the whole comic book industry, you've obviously branched out to doing it, you know, the Millerverse and stuff. So you've moved away from things like DC and Marvel, but they've seen a real decline in terms of their creative output and their reception and the amount of money that they're making and stuff like that. As I understand it, the comic book industry, despite all the movies and stuff that are getting produced, it's kind of in dire straits in a lot of ways, at least from the big two publishers. And a lot of it, as I understand it, is come down to like they've brought in a lot of people who are really into their politics and really try and inject all that stuff into their work. Is that ever going to end? Where the hell is this leading?
Do you know, I actually think that it's kind of similar to what it's always been in that you've got good and bad. You know, that there's still some great stuff in there. You know, you guys like Jason Aaron, who's a brilliant writer. You know, you've got just doing like great stories, you know, like great classic kind of stories. You've got, he's doing The Punisher right now. You've got Scott Snyder, you've got James Tynion, who's a terrific writer and all that. You know, there's a whole bunch of people who are really, really good. The trouble is there's not that many at the big two, at Marvel and DC. And what the industry really needs is Marvel to be really strong. Like every success in independent comics comes on the back of Marvel being really strong, because people come into the stores and buy Marvel comics, and while they're there, they try Kickass. You know, it's no, you know, it's no accident that, you know, after Civil War, people came in and picked up Kickass, you know, because they were coming in and buying Marvel comics at the time, you know. So our little indie books did disproportionately well, you know. But when Marvel isn't doing great, the industry suffers. DC doesn't do as well. DC relies on a healthy Marvel, and the indie books rely on both of them, but particularly Marvel, because people get out the habit. It's a bit like, I remember when Avatar came out, a lot of movies that came out around the same time as Avatar in 2009, they really overperformed the other things in the cinema. And the thing that came out for about 6 months after, because people get back into the habit of going to the cinema again. And it's the same thing with comics as well, you know, that if Marvel isn't doing anything super exciting, and I think there's a bunch of reasons, actually. I think the sort of political stuff is tedious, you know, like, you know, that is, nobody disagrees with it, right? It's like most people are really decent. You know, I think in life people are decent, and people believe in fairness and they believe in equality. You know, it's like you have to be the Red Skull or something like that, you know, to not believe in equal rights for everybody. You know, it's like, so you don't need every story to be about that, you know, and
yeah, that's the thing. And it feels like sometimes they bring in writers who that's all they can see is just like
bad writing, though, isn't it?
Their politics and stuff. And it's like, you know, you've got these yeah, I think it was Civil War 2 where they had a character who's got a t-shirt is like, ask me about my feminist agenda. And so it's like, oh, fuck off. Like, nobody needs that crap in their comic books. Like, I imagine like what you want is a bit of escapism. You want a bit of fun, a bit of entertainment. Yeah, you can reflect real world problems and issues and stuff, but like there should be at least a veil of fiction between you and that, like rather than just preaching at people.
The reason I'm again, I hate to sound, I feel like internet Jesus suddenly, you know, but like the reason I'm forgiven of even heavy-handed stuff is I've done it too, you know, and I think it can work, you know, like comics have always been quite political, you know, like Superman in 1938 was quite political, you know, like a lot of that stuff in the 40s, World War II comics and everything, pretty political. And Stan Lee was hugely political, like 1960s comics, but not at the expense of being entertaining, you know. So, I mean, it is really important to keep that going. So when I was doing the Ultimates, for example, which was the template for the Avengers stuff, I had Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, and everybody sent into Iraq to take out weapons of mass destruction by George W. Bush, you know, and it was persons of mass destruction, you know, the superheroes being sent into Iraq to wipe out bases, and they were being politicized in the Marvel universe, you know, in the story, and people were all kind of angry about it, and there was a schism between the superheroes, the ones who wanted to do it, the ones who didn't want to obey orders and everything. But your stories, I think they always reflect the world they're happening in, so I can see why people do it as well at the same time. To me, it's not, I always think like woke is thrown around so easily and everything, you know, but I think that it's not the politics, it's actually the level of skill in stories, you know, like It's actually just, am I entertained or am I not? And I think the real problem actually is, there's two things. I think one is a lot of the good writers have gone, you know, like a lot of the people I really love are off working full time elsewhere now, you know, in different industries. I think that's a bit of an issue. You know, there's a lot of really good writers around just now, but I think there was more when you look at 80s comics. It's staggering how many good books there were. I actually counted at one time, and in one month there was over 40 books that I would buy, whereas right now there's maybe 4 or 5 that I'm buying. You know, so it's a smaller talent pool, I think. But I think there's something else going on as well, which is people are scared to take risks now as well because of cancel culture, and I think that's really hurt comics. I think that you know, a lot of the best comics comes from people potentially making a fool of themselves or doing a career-ending idea. Like a cartoonist is an assassin. A cartoonist has got to be somebody who is the court jester, you know, somebody who'll do really stupid stuff that could otherwise get them into huge trouble. Like Frank Miller, when he did Batman, think how radical Dark Knight Returns was. Like this sort of alcoholic 55-year-old Batman, the big fat guy and all that, you know, and he's taking the mickey out of Reagan and all that kind of stuff. It's like, you'd never seen a comic like this published by DC or Marvel before, so it was really radical. And radical comics bring people in. Whenever you do something that's a little bit risky, people are interested. Whereas if you do stuff that is just approved all the time, you know, that Twitter says, oh yeah, this has our stamp of approval, it's kind of boring. So I think the cancel culture thing, I think, is pretty much ended. I think it's kind of gone now. You know, it was people who were out to hurt people, really, you know, like people who were aggrieved at maybe not getting into the industry, like looking to destroy people and hopefully make them lose their jobs or their houses or their ultimately kill themselves or whatever. You know, I mean, there was a very, very nasty period in culture, I think. But I think it's kind of, that sport seems to have ended now and people kind of see it for what it is. And I think when people just ignore it and crack on and do daft, funny stuff again, comics will be all the better for it. Comics is at its best when it's a pirate medium, I think.
I've always championed artistic freedom over like any kind of political considerations, and I would rather have something that was pushing the boundaries and just telling the story that the original author wants to tell. And like you say, the whole climate around cancel culture and stuff. I hope you're right, and I hope that is on the wane. Like from what I see. It still seems to be very prevalent. It's definitely prevalent in terms of movie production and stuff. Like the studios are absolutely beholden to people on social media in terms of like what's acceptable, what they can do.
I don't know. I can smell it changing. There's something.
I hope that's right. I hope that's coming. I hope it
really
is.
Do. I think I'm obsessed with trends, right? I mean, I love history, and the thing I find fascinating is youth trends, you know. So 1955, you'd rock and roll, 66, psychedelia, you know, broadly, 77, broadly punk, 88, acid house. 99, this is going to sound silly, but I think that was the 11 years of superheroes. You know, everything that's come after it is corporate superheroes, and it's, you know, not the auteurs, it's the machine that's making these things. But the cool youth trends from 99 to 2010, I think, was that. But I think 2010 to 2021 or thereabouts, I think it's that culture. You know, it's the Twitter assassin culture. You know, it's the Puritan culture. You know, it's, if it was Game of Thrones, it would be the High Sparrow kind of thing. You know, like people being destroyed for not being pure enough and then turning on their friends who equally then in turn are not pure enough as well. You know, so like I think that era mercifully has ended. You know, I think it's still twitching, but I think it's pretty much gone. And people, I think, are starting to appreciate what artistic freedom is again, you know, like to actually tell the kind of stories they want to tell, and not be beholden to this very tiny mob, and they're going out into the mainstream again. And I think, I keep going on about Top Gun, but something happened with Top Gun 2. it was just something like the normies are back in charge after Top Gun 2. It just felt like lunatics just seemed to fade away into the background, and this movie made $1.3 billion so far. And I just feel the adults are back in charge.
I really hope so. And this is why I promoted it so much. Like, I was so happy that this movie came out. I went into the cinema. I loved it. I came out feeling great. I was like, I want other people to experience that first of all, because like I think it'll be good for their just outlook on life.
Yeah.
But also, like, I just want Hollywood to take that on board and say, like, hey, look, this kind of classic idea of like the hero that you used to love, he's back, but he's older, but he's still vital, he's still interesting, and he's still capable of doing stuff. Doesn't have to be deconstructed. He doesn't have to go through some postmodernist nightmare. That can still work. That's what people want. They just want good old-fashioned heroes that they can look up to. It's not hard. I just wish I wish I hadn't taken so long for Hollywood to realize this.
But I had to, because it's a 30-year cycle, and the last time this happened was Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven, and prior to that, you had John Wayne in True Grit and everything. It's like they have to go away so you appreciate them coming back. And the thing I would say, I cannot believe how Christ-like I sound tonight. I know I'm a Catholic and everything, but if I have to say something positive about the last 20 years though as well, is we've also never had as many great geek movies as well. I know there's been some crushing disappointments in there, but if you'd told me 10 years ago that I would love the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, who could have anticipated that? I never dreamed that we would get another Batman movie after Batman and Robin, and yet suddenly we've got all these amazing Marvel and DC movies, a Shazam movie and stuff like that. So at the same time, it's also been a wonderful time for people like us too, who love this kind of culture. I mean, I remember the 90s really well, and just hoping for the best, going to see The Shadow or Rocketeer and all these kind of things. The
Rocketeer, I love that. I love the Rocketeer.
But maybe every 2 years you had a comic book movie coming out. But we've really had this wonderful period where there's maybe 5 or 6 really good ones a year. I think the mistake they've got now is there's one every week. There's just, I feel as if there's a Marvel event or whatever, a superhero costume that I haven't seen before every week. So it's a bit like eating sugar all the time. You definitely need to have some protein in there. I think we've got oversaturation at the moment. And I think because of that, it's peaked. I mean, for me, the Marvel thing possibly peaked in 2019 with Endgame. I think it's the phase 4 of Marvel has felt like decline.
I've very much been of that mindset as well. And I was going to ask you as well, there's always that theory of genres, like how they come and go in Hollywood. Like you had the era of the Western, the war movie, whatever it might be. And they go through the stages, like the early stages, the golden age, the sort of parody, and then the revisionist kind of style. Are we in that sort of declining phase of comic book movies? Because and I hate to say this because I know I'm talking to a comic book guy, but like after 20 years of comic book movies, I'm almost burned out on it now. I'm just at the point where I'm like, I kind of just want Hollywood to move on to something else now. Like, I feel like we've had enough superheroes. We've had enough of this stuff. There's not really much more you can do with this after dozens and dozens of films. Where can we go from here?
Here's my massive smackdown on that, right? You'll love it. Is that what you're doing is you're confusing a medium with a genre. So comic books is not just superheroes. Comic books is everything. It can be about anything, and they are now, which is amazing. Yeah, I mean, in the 90s, comic books was mainly superheroes, but now it's anything. It's sci-fi, it's horror, it's any weird mad thing. Scott Pilgrim was a comic book. Road to Perdition was a comic book. You know what I mean? So I think to say comic book movies would end is like saying the novel to screen thing will end, because all it is a story in a particular form. Do I think the superhero thing is ending? I think it has peaked. And I think what it will do though is it'll take a while to really come down, because it came from such a high. $2.9 billion made from Endgame doesn't end overnight. So Spider-Man No Way Home made $2 billion. It's like these things are still overperforming, but at the same time they're also underperforming. So I think what the market does is it course corrects, doesn't it? So when you try and bring 20 of these out a year and audiences reject 70% of them, you're eventually going to bring out less, aren't you? So I think what we're going to get is a stabilization and over the next couple of years, they'll slow down the number of ones they do and make the ones they do special, because the ones that really stand out are the ones that do well. Same as television. I think The Boys is terrific. I really love The Boys. So what they've done there is given us a kink we haven't seen before. What we can't have anymore is formulaic, cookie cutter superhero projects. I think you have to add a little twist to it to make it interesting. And the rewards are massive if that happens. But at the same time, I'm also excited. I mean, half of my franchises, more than half of my franchises are non-superhero, and we're working on a lot of those right now, and it's really exciting because you're cutting into new territory. Like the Magic Order is a thing I'm doing. It's like The Sopranos meets Harry Potter kind of thing, you know. It's a comic book, but it doesn't look like any Marvel movie you've ever seen, you know, so that's one of the next things we're filming. American Jesus, the thing we're filming just now in Mexico. It's about the return of Jesus Christ as a little boy, Stand By Me, you know, meets the Book of Revelation kind of thing. Down in Mexico, doesn't feel like any Marvel movie, you know. So I think the opportunities are absolutely enormous still for people who work in comics if they want to have their stuff adapted into Hollywood. At the same time, there's something pretty cool about just doing comics too. I mean, I do respect people that keep it pure and don't become a whore like me.
I was going to say, like, I've definitely fallen into that trap of just equating comics with superheroes. Like, for me, they're synonymous, but like that's an outsider looking in very much. And yeah, like you obviously have to look a bit deeper and realize, yeah, there's the whole ocean of stuff there, like whole different genres, everything like done in that format. But yeah, I think when I was posing the question there, it was very much from the point of view of like superhero movie and adaptations and stuff. It's like, for me, it feels like we've reached that point of saturation where it's like we can't realistically do anything groundbreaking with this now. There needs to almost pause a period of like reflection or whatever, or just, you know, a break from it before we go back to it again. But I you know, there's too much money at stake. I guess they're not going to stop when you've still got films cracking $1 billion. They're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they might do is start bringing the budgets down a little bit. DC have done that, like movies like Shazam. I think they spent about $120 million on that, you know, which is a nice realistic amount of money, you know, because I know Marvel lie about the budgets. Marvel spend insane money on these movies, you know.
Yeah.
But the return is so huge, they kind of, you know, they get the return each time, and then you sell your toys and your merch and everything on the back of that. But I do think the budgets might start trimming a little bit. I think the number of projects inevitably will have to come down. But at the same time, if you look in the bookstores, it's very interesting. Bookstores are usually about 10 years ahead of where the movies are. So what is selling in the bookstore tends to be the films 5 or 10 years down the line you're going to see. So that's certainly the way it works at Marvel. And the comic book graphic novel sort of business is really diversifying. Obviously, manga is a gigantic thing now. And you're just seeing the kind of comics you wouldn't have imagined 10, 20 years ago. So that's going to be really interesting when you start seeing that stuff appearing on Netflix or Amazon or in cinemas or whatever. It's a brilliant time to be doing this job. Like, I mean, I think it's always been a fun job, but I think the guys who invented this industry, I think, wouldn't believe where it is now. I think when I walk into HMV or one of these big stores, you know, and I just see all this Marvel and DC and independent comic merch, it's like, this is the world I dreamed of when I was 10, you know. It's fantastic.
I always thought, like, because, you know, I came into all the Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff not really having any kind of comic background, but I did realize, and I wondered, if you were a lifelong comic fan and you like Iron Man was your favorite comic ever or whatever, or Thor or Black Widow or whatever, to suddenly see it realized on screen in this grand fashion, like with incredible budgets and stuff, and it looks fantastic. It must have just been like the greatest experience ever to finally see all of this stuff go mainstream after like so many years of just like being niche.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, you know Scotland, you know Coatbridge, the small town where I grew up, and you know, I was the only guy who knew who Tony Stark was in my town of 60,000 people, you know. And now my aunties know who Tony Stark is. My aunties know that Happy Hogan is played by Jon Favreau. You know, it's like, it's so weird that this thing that just used to be me is now everyone, and I love that. I think it's amazing. Yeah. Like, I sometimes worry I've been bumped on the head and like this isn't actually happening, you know. Like, if I had to draw a picture of what I wanted 2022 to be, it would be the world that we're in just now with all this stuff.
Fair dues. I mean, it's funny because there's so many like different like comic to movie adaptations I want to ask you about, and obviously I'm aware that we've only got so much time tonight, but you know, when it came to things like the Kingsman movies, like what was your kind of perception of how they did with that? Because you know, there's three at this point. Obviously, we've had like the first Kingsman, which was absolutely fantastic, huge hit. The Golden Circle seemed to like flounder a little bit. It didn't quite hit the same level. And then you had the Kingsman, like the prequel, which I really liked, but it didn't do big numbers. I don't know if that was the pandemic or whatever, but like, how did you perceive it?
Well, I've always been very involved. I mean, whenever I did Wanted, I was an exec producer on it, but my involvement was pretty limited, you know. I gave a couple of notes, which, you know, they would politely kind of say, oh, yeah, that sounds cool and everything, you know. But like, but by the time of Kickass, I learned how to play the game a little bit. So I made sure it went to somebody who I really liked. And I loved Wanted, by the way. I was super happy with it. I think it worked out great. It made 342 million on a 70 million budget and all that, you know, awesome. And it kickstarted my career in Hollywood. Kick-Ass, I actually just kept control over, though. You know, I went to Matthew Vaughn. Matthew brought in Jane Goldman, who's a genius. We all got on extremely well. You know, the couple of drafts of the script, you know, awesome. Couple of notes and everything, you know, but we were all on the same page. It was great, you know. Kingsman 1 was like that as well. I was super involved at every stage of it, you know, like looking at edition tapes and all that kind of stuff. But then I was in the middle of selling the company to Netflix whenever the Golden Circle was getting made. So there was no book. I didn't write a sequel book. And so it was the original story. And I wasn't really involved. I went to a few screenings and gave some notes and everything, but it wasn't me. And then the third one, Matthew just always wanted to do a big historical epic, and he wanted to do the Kingsman. And, you know, I enjoyed the Kingsman. I think it's good. But you're always going to struggle doing a historical action piece. And I remember saying that to him at the time when he told me he was going to do it. And what I love about Matthew is he's got that public school confidence of, I'm doing it anyway, I don't care. You know?
Yeah.
And he said, well, I want to do a big Man Who Would Be King style epic, you know, set 100 years ago. And he did it, you know, and there's some great stuff in it and everything. But like, but it was very much a Matthew thing, you know, as was Golden Circle. Like where I'd have taken it would be different. But people loved it, you know. I mean, like, I think the first Kingsman cost 81 million, made 425 million, which is insane, you know.
Oh, it's fantastic.
And the second one cost about another 15 million. It was maybe a 95 million or something, and made 420, almost exactly the same. So I mean, the profit was insane. The third one only made about 130 million or something. It didn't make that much and still cost the same.
It was during lockdowns, though, wasn't it? It was still.
I think it's a tough sell. I mean, a historical action thing is always a tough sell. Indiana Jones, you have to remember, was made in 1981, which wasn't that long after World War II. You know, so it was like setting a movie now in about 1989. You know, so it's like it's not much of a difference from where the audience actually currently is. But you set something 100 years previous, and it's an uphill battle. But what I really respect about Matthew is he just ignores everything and just is like, this is the movie I want to do, and I'm going to do it. So Matthew's got all these mad things he wants to do, and I love the fact that he told me he's got a plan to make a movie about cricket in like the year 2035 or something like that, you know. So I love the fact that he'll do it, you know. So I mean, I was talking to Matthew today for like an hour and a half. Like, he and I phone each other, like, even though we're not working together because I'm at Netflix and he's over at Apple. We talk, you know, twice a week or something, and all the gossip. He's an amazing gossip, Matthew. He seems to. He's like some kind of intelligence officer or something. He's got his people and he's always got the most amazing gossip.
When you were talking about Wanted and Kick-Ass there, like, Wanted is one of the few like comic book graphic novel things that I can genuinely say I've read, and then I watched the movie, and I'm still baffled why they cast Angelina Jolie and not Halle Berry, because it's like clearly that was who it was meant to be.
No, do you know, it's an age-old trick in comics that you quite often, just so that people know the character, if it's new characters, so people know the character from issue to issue, you maybe use a template of an actor. So in V for Vendetta, for example, Alan Moore used Sean Connery and Donald Pleasance in V for Vendetta, just so people knew who the characters were. And similarly, you know, like I think Batman was based on Gregory Peck, I think, you know, like Bruce Wayne. So I just picked people at random who sort of seemed like the sort of person who'd be good for this. But I never imagined it would be a movie at that point, because my God, they barely made Batman movies at that time, never mind small independent comic books, you know. So it was just very, very random. And Angelina Jolie was the biggest actress in the world at the time. So whenever they phoned me up and says, look, we're thinking of doing Angelina Jolie for this, what do you think? I was like, oh yeah, sounds good. You know, so, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're not going to say no to Angelina Jolie, but
well, it was funny. I had no idea really how big she was. I was aware she was a big actress, but it was actually on the way out to Prague, out to the set. I remember I stopped in Holland on the way there, and I had about 5 hours to kill in the airport. And I went to the bar in the airport and I sat and drinking, and walked about the airport, you know, as you do between planes and everything. And I went into the magazine, to the newsagent, you know, and there was a big magazine wall that was enormous, you know, sort of pre-internet destroying all the magazines. You know, there was this gigantic wall of magazines. And I remember Angelina Jolie was on a third of the covers. She was on the cover of like golf magazines and on the cover of anything you could think of, knitting magazines. They had her picture. And I was like, oh my God, she's kind of a big deal. You know, this is quite important. We've got her.
In the 2000s, like she was massive.
Massive.
I remember when they did the Tomb Raider movie, and as much as that movie was kind of campy and a bit shit, man, they couldn't have picked a better actress to play Lara Croft than Angelina Jolie. Like she absolutely nailed it. She had the physique, the big pouty lips, and everything. It was like perfect, nice one. You nailed it.
But yeah, that was a really surreal experience, because that was my first experience. Even before I was on the Iron Man set, you know, I was on the Wanted set, which is quite odd. You know, I was out there, something that had been inside my head had actually been realized in 3 dimensions. And I was actually standing there with people wearing Wanted caps and T-shirts and things, all standing 300 people on a set. It was really exciting. It was really cool.
That's the thing that I think must be so strange, but so awesome at the same time. It's just like all these people have congregated, they're marshaled behind this project that was your brainchild. Like it came out of just an idea in your head, and suddenly you're on a set with tens of millions of dollars at stake because of you. That's got to be cool.
It is pretty cool. It's a bit like having a baby, you know, like something that's in your head is suddenly out there and it's in the real world, which is quite odd. But at the same time, I guess there's a slight pressure comes with it, but I didn't really think about that at the time. I was just rolling with it and thinking this is really fun, you know, it's great. But it was actually David Goyer. Weirdly, I was on the Batman set with David Goyer, which was being filmed in Chicago around the same time. And David Goyer says to me, "You've no idea how lucky you are." And I was like, "How do you mean?" And he says, "This is your first thing, and it's Angelina Jolie, and it's a big movie, and it's a great new director and everything, you know." He said, "Your first 5 things are supposed to be crap. You know, it's really enjoy this." And I tried to make sure I did, you know, like I thought this is really kind of special getting this lucky this quickly, you know, on the film side.
Did you get to party with Angelina, like rap parties or anything like that? You get to like mingle.
I sat and watched the DVD with her. She was watching, you know, Little Britain.
Yeah,
she was sitting watching Little Britain, and I walked into her trailer. And I had a carry out, weirdly, you know. You'll know this is really weird, right? But like I'm really fussy, right? I really hate food that's fancy, and I really like really basic food. And I remember like the chef was Angelina's chef the first day I showed up on the set. And because I was a producer, I got to use Angelina's chef, right? And I said to this guy, "What have you got?" And he said, "Well, I've got lobster and I've got all that." And I was like, "Oh, I can't eat anything like that." And I said, "Is there nothing like sausages or something like that?" You know?
Can you do deep fried pizza?
It was kind of like that. And he says, "No." So I went to one of the drivers and I said, "Look, could you take me back into Prague, into town?" And I bought 3 Big Macs. And I brought the 3 Big Macs back, and I said to this guy who was like a 5-star chef, you know, I said, "Could you heat these up for me? Could you keep these Big Macs? And I'll have 1 now for lunch, and I'll have 2 tonight for dinner." And he looked at me like, "You disgusting pig," you know. He was like, Everything I heard about Scotland is true. So anyway, when I went down to Angelina's trailer, I showed up with 2 Big Macs. And I thought, I can't eat both of these while she's here. I said, do you want a Big Mac? And I can't remember if she ate it, but we sat and we watched Little Britain. You know, so.
That's fucking surreal, man, honestly. Was she pretty sound? Was she all right?
She's really funny and, you know, just a good laugh. You know, she's kind of very smart, super smart, really aware of what she should be doing and everything. You know, like she had loads of good ideas on set in terms of where the camera should be and all that kind of stuff. She was very collaborative. You could tell she was going to be a director as well, you know, but she just really interesting, actually, like a really interesting person and a really nice person. She was really pleasant and everything, just a total pro. What I've always found really fascinating is the really sort of big name actors. I've always been impressed by how nice they are. Like Nicolas Cage is my favorite of the lot. Like Nicolas Cage in 2008, when we were shooting Kickass. I remember he was the first guy on the set, 6 o'clock in the morning, first day, and was just the loveliest guy. And the two of us got on really well. And he was so talented, and every take was really interesting. He was doing something different every time, but at the same time had time for everybody and was super polite and just really engaging and all that, you know. And you do weirdly find that, like, the people who last and the people who do quite well, people quite enjoy working with. It's rare to see that kind of, you know, diva behavior and everything.
No, I was going to ask you about Nick Cage, actually, because that was literally going to be the next question I was going to, you know, go into was Kick-Ass. And, you know, Big Daddy, like, as a character, really cool. And I think Nick Cage just played him brilliantly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just, you know, I think I've got so much respect for him now, knowing what he's gone through. Like, as you know, I know he's had to take on a lot of projects that he probably wouldn't have done otherwise. But he said himself, and I totally believe that this is true. He's like, I gave 100% to every role that I was in, no matter how shit. I
totally believe that. So
yeah,
he's the most sincere guy in the world, and weirdly, like I know a lot of people who used to be his neighbors. Weirdly, like I asked him what he was like as a neighbor, and all that, and he said he's just a really gen guy, like just a cracking guy, you know. And you never hear anything bad about Nick Cage. He's actually just like a nice person. And that movie was brilliant, you know, the Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I
need to see that.
Honestly, it's really funny, but really touching and everything as well. It's great, you know. The trailer does it justice. That sets the tone really well. Really likable film. But I think you must have read the GQ article, you know, where you just saw that guy went through a tough time, you know, and he was just like a real person, and there was no phony kind of Hollywood stuff around like that. He was just telling you, like, he was in big trouble, things weren't good, and he was just trying to come back, you know. So I think those kind of people you love to see come back with a second act, don't you? And I want Nick Cage to have a brilliant second act because he deserves it.
Very, very much so. Like he, you know, obviously, like he's enjoyed a lot of success and financial benefits, like through his career, but it feels like he's never gone to his head, and he's remained humble throughout all this. And yeah, like I say, he's been a good sport with all the, like, he's had to be in shit films and stuff, and he's almost embraced the meme. And I think when he does that, he almost becomes bulletproof, because it's like, well, you can't make fun of him because he's already accepted. Like, yeah, I had to do shit films because I was in a hole. This had to be done. But I'm past that now, and I'm looking forward to doing other stuff. And when a person, even if they're in a shit film, gives it their all, you have to give them a certain level of respect for that, because it's like, that is actual dedication and professionalism. Sorry, I had too much of this. Fuck.
Yeah, I want you to be crying. You should be crying when you're saying this. You know?
Yeah, my eyes are pointing in different directions right now. But yeah, like when they demonstrate that level of professionalism despite the shit circumstances, can't help but respect that. Like I think Nick Cage, fucking, I'm all up for him having a career resurgence. Him and Brendan Fraser, they need to make a comeback in the next couple of years.
Exactly. No, it's funny because sometimes you really miss an actor, don't you? And like to see them again, it feels like seeing an old friend, doesn't it? So I want to see Nick Cage. Like, the idea of doing a National Treasure film without Nick Cage.
Fuck that. Yeah. Fuck off. National Treasure, like TV show. No, I want Nick Cage for National Treasure 3. Make it happen right now. Like, I don't want anything else apart from that. Like, he made that entire franchise.
Oh my god! I mean, doing it without him. I mean, that's bad. That's bad magic, isn't it? It's like that movie's cursed if they don't have Nicolas Cage on.
You know what I always wanted to see as well, like Gone in 60 Seconds Part 2, because I
All right.
really like that movie, and I think Nick
Yeah.
Cage was brilliant in it. Like Angelina Jolie was in it as well.
Yeah.
Like you had so many great actors in it. I was like, that could have been a franchise like the Fast and the Furious. I wish they'd done more with it.
Do you know this? It kind of was the Fast and the Furious before Fast and the Furious, wasn't it? I hadn't really thought of that.
I think the two films came out round about the same time because Fast and the Furious is so fucking old. I was in high school when the first one came.
I wasn't even born. I wasn't even born when it came out. Do you know what's so funny? Fast and the Furious fascinates me. Like one of my pals produces those films, Chris Morgan, and he's a genius. You know, I mean, like what he's done with those films is amazing. It's the only time I've ever seen something go down and then go up and go up and go up and just keep going up. It's incredible. I mean, I don't know. The fourth and the fifth films of that they should have been straight to DVD by that point, you know, and yet they turned it into the biggest franchise in the world. It's absolutely amazing.
It's like they realized like we've got to move away from this whole idea of street racing and we'll make it heist movies.
Yeah,
heist movies with a whole bunch of like, you know, actors, you know, all playing off each other and stuff. And that was their winning formula. That was like the MCU of street racing films.
It was the MCU for jocks, isn't it? It's the MCU for jocks. I think, Fast and the Furious. Can I take this in the kitchen, by the way, because my charge is just about to go and I'm going to charge it up.
Give me do you want me to like put you on, like switch your camera off or whatever? All right, go. All right, well, while Mark is like resetting up, I'll take a second and I'll see if I can bring up all of the super chats because I know there's a whole bunch that's been coming on while we've been doing this.
It's too short. Hang on, I need to.
This is like Back to the Future when Doc's trying to like pull the fucking cable.
What am I going to do? Hang on, I'll try and pull it forward and see if I can make this work.
All right.
Give me a second.
All right, no worries.
This is like some rubbish DVD extra, isn't it?
Yeah. This is the
director's cut. The rubbish director's cut. I think that's working. I think we're good.
Yeah, we got you. Yeah, we're fine. Tremendous fashionable place you're in as well. It looks fantastic.
We're actually renting this place. Like our house is getting done up, and we've rented this like furnished place, and it's completely mental. I mean, it looks like Trump Towers or something like that. Everything's kind of gold and silver and everything, you know. So like we've got a place around the corner that's got 5 months renovation getting done.
Nice. No, that's all right. Give me 1 second. I was going to say as well, because like while we've been chatting here tonight, there's been a lot of people sending in super chats, like questions for both of us. And obviously, I don't want to prevail upon your time, but if you've got maybe like half an hour or so, we could go through a couple of them.
Yeah, cool. Do you want to run to maybe 11 o'clock or something? You know, now.
Yeah, sure.
The kids are upstairs watching Planet of the Apes, and I'll be able to put them to bed right after that. You know, the school holidays, it's kind of the law of the jungle, isn't it? You know, you get them in bed at 8 o'clock normally, and then school holidays, it's like, we're in charge now. We're in charge.
I think, when it comes to school holidays, it's just like you just want to survive pretty much.
Just try and get through the day.
It's like as long as no one's died, everyone's been fed and stuff.
Do a head count if everybody's still alive. It's okay.
Okay, let me see if I can find them here. All right, give me just 1 second while I bring them up. So, the very first one that comes in here was, so Russell Pierce, who says, I ran a graphic novel reading club, which was eventually ruined by The Message. I'm sorry, I can't do a booming voice. I had a whole month dedicated to Mark, and I called it March Millar. There you go.
Please tell me it was in March.
It better be, yeah. Yeah, but this is obviously something we talked about a little bit earlier on. But I touch upon The Message at times in my reviews, and it's like, it just it gets a bit pervasive in
I think it's people grasping for a story, isn't it? Like, it's hard to write a story, you know, and sometimes it's easy just to throw in a wee bit of politics or something, and that's your ending, isn't it? You know, like I think you kind of like some absolutely brilliant stories have had what you would call the message in there as well. You know, it's for me, it's all down to whether it's good or not. You know, I mean, all I care about is quality. I don't care about anything else.
I had a conversation with Mahler. I don't know if you've heard of him, but like he does like very long reviews of movies and that sort of thing. And he asked me actually straight up, like, is it possible to have like a movie or project or TV show, whatever, that's very, very woke, but is good quality? And I said, and I had to think about this because it was a really good question actually, and it's quite an interesting idea to touch upon. And my take on it was like, yes, it is, but it all comes down to the skill of the writer involved. You can work in any kind of politics that you want. Like you can work in all kinds of interesting ideas. Like Star Trek did it for decades.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it comes down to your ability to work it into the story in a way that's not intrusive and that's balanced and fair, and it allows the audience to make some decisions upon, by themselves. So you're not just preaching to them, you're presenting them with different viewpoints and saying to them, like, well, you decide what is the correct course of action here. That's what I think is the essence of good storytelling. But like it's a very difficult thing to do in the current climate, and the more politics you try to push in, the more skill it requires to make that work without just becoming overbearing.
I don't know. See, I think you put 100 people in the room and everyone will agree on pretty much everything. You know, I don't quite buy the political polarization. I think all people are fundamentally decent, bar some crazies, like a few random crazies. Most people just want the same things, which is a roof over their heads and their kids to go to a good school and to be safe and all that. People fundamentally believe in the same stuff, and the polarization, I think, is fake. I think in a lot of ways. So what I find weird is when I see a story where I'm having something rammed down my throat that I agree with. Like most people agree with equal rights, for example. It's like you don't need to tell that story. You have to be a lunatic not to. If you believe one human being should be treated differently from another human being, you're a movie bad guy. It's like most people agree. So I just think, what's the point of telling that story? Tell a story about the Death Star exploding instead or something. I don't care.
Yeah, well, I remember talking to Dankula about the Aliens franchise, and like some of the takes on this have been like, well, it's anti-corporationism, and it's like a critique of capitalism because, like, it portrays like the evil corporate overlords like sacrificing spaceship crews to harvest this alien entity that they can then use for further profits and stuff like that. And then there's just a picture of the Chad guy with like the mustache and the beard and stuff, and just going, haha, smart guns go brrr. that was the retort to it. I was like, that is fucking perfect. Sometimes you just want to see shit explode. That's all it needs.
I saw a producer from Lord of the Rings 20 years ago being interviewed, and they were talking about all the trees being cut down. I can't remember the second one, the Two Towers, whatever, but you've got all the trees all being attacked. And one of the producers was saying, yeah, it's a really strong environmental message. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's just a cool scene. It's a fight scene,
Yeah. No, I think there's a great quote from Peter Jackson, and Gary from Nerdrotic has referenced this quite a few times, where he said, like, look, we had our own political ideas and stuff that we could have tried to work into these movies, but we said, it's not about us. It's about like just being true to what Tolkien originally envisioned.
Yeah,
we're not going to be so narcissistic as to try and like work our own views into this trilogy. We're just going to tell the story as he wanted it told. And what you ended up with was one of the most fantastic trilogies of movies ever made. And I think there's a lot to be said for the humbleness of just being able to say, It's not for us to mess with this. We're just going to tell the story as the author intended it, and just let it stand on its own merits. I think that's great.
The biggest mistake in bad writing is to give the heroes your voice and the baddies someone you disagree with. Like which you see a lot, but when I was writing the Marvel characters, I remember just thinking, what would they say? What would be their personality, as opposed to putting my personality on it. And people would go nuts at this. Sometimes it was crazy, but Captain America grew up in the 30s. He grew up with FDR and the New Deal, and a pretty socially conservative time. In 1945, he was frozen, and then he's awakened in modern days. So his ideals would be like late 30s, early 40s. That's what shaped him. So he would be quite different from most guys today. He would have a very unusual viewpoint. He'd be more like your granddad. Like his views would be a bit more like your granddad, which is kind of weird. He'd look like Brad Pitt, but he'd think like your granddad, is how I described him,
I love that, though. I love that idea.
Is, so that's the way I wrote him when I did it. Tony Stark has been in the heart of government. He doesn't trust anyone. He's seen the Republicans. He's seen the Democrats. He doesn't trust any of them, but he'll sell them weapons. That was his personality before he became Iron Man. And he would be libertarian. I think he'd be very suspicious of big government. I think that Elon Musk is a pretty great template for him. He is all about his business and thinking outside the box, and he's got no time for people, like politicians who have such a black and white view of the world. Thor would be entirely different again. So you've got these three very, very different personalities, and then when they all talk to each other, it's super interesting. Whereas what you see in a lot of comics is all the good guys talk like you, and the bad guys all talk like your internet enemies.
Yeah.
And I love the nuance. The nuance is what makes these guys 3D and interesting.
I love the idea of playing with, what is the bad guy's motivation? Why does he do the things that he does? What drives him? Like, he obviously has a worldview that shapes what he does. Let's explore it, because I hate this idea that, like, and it's not very often explored, but like this thing of like the bad guy's just bad because he loves being evil. There's obviously something that motivates him to do what he does. He sees himself as the hero of his own story, even if people don't understand him. Great, let's go into that. It's conflicting worldviews. It's interesting, and it allows the audience to explore how they see the world from different perspectives, because there's always going to be two sides to it.
Well, Sam Jackson's character is a good illustration of that in Kingsman. I based that on a guy called, Professor James Lovelock. Have you ever heard of Professor James Lovelock? He's a really interesting guy. He's a scientist who, back in the 1950s, whenever he was at university, he's almost 100 now, the 40s and 50s when he was at university, he was so smart that the university didn't believe he wasn't cheating in exams. And they used to put a security guard beside him while he was doing his papers, because they thought he must be cheating. He can't be this good, So he's really, really smart. And he came up with the whole idea of Gaia theory. He's the guy that came up with that environmental idea back in the 1970s, that the Earth was a living organism, and that the human race was essentially like a virus. And the only way to get rid of a virus is to increase your temperature, which is what the human body does as well. You eliminate the virus, and then you let the temperature come back down, which is what global warming is, once you've eliminated the threat. So his idea was to take the virus down by 90%. That was the plot of Kingsman. To drop it by 90% so that 10% of the human race could live on. So he had kind of like a slightly noble idea. His idea was, instead of 100% of the people dying, only 90% would die, but the human species would continue with these 10%, and he would regulate it. So it's kind of weirdly noble in its own way, People went nuts, of course, because I had an eco guy as a bad guy. Everybody was like, "Screw you, Miller," But,
yeah, but it shows you, like, you can take any ideology, no matter how noble. If you take it to its nth degree, it's going to become evil, because you're sacrificing morality for the sake of an end goal. But that's, again, it's an interesting thing to play with. And I like the villain from Kingsman, because he raised a very valid point of, when it comes to a virus and a disease and a host, either the host kills the virus or the virus kills the host. But either way, the virus has to die.
Yeah.
And the human, if you see humans as the virus, well, like ultimately it's going to happen one way or another. So yeah, I think that it's an interesting thing to play with.
Well, all the best Bond villains have a point, or they have a great plan, certainly. Anyway, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've been going to the Bond things every week and watching them on the big screen. You know, they're doing this.
Oh, I love the old Bond movies.
And see the ones with the good baddies. I mean, you realise those are the good Bond films, the ones you remember, whether it's Goldfinger or Spy Who Loved Me. You know, somebody with a cool plan. That's what always makes a great Bond film, isn't it? Like, I don't think there's a great Bond film that doesn't have a great baddie, and vice versa.
Yeah, he needs someone to play off. Like, he needs someone larger than life, someone interesting. Yeah, like someone that's going to be a match for him in terms of intellect and abilities and stuff. And you know, sometimes you got it, sometimes you didn't. Yeah. Who knows what we're going to get with the new Bonds? Like, I don't know where that's going to go.
I suspect they'll go comedic slightly. You know, I think they'll definitely go lighter because Bond seems to do the opposite of what the previous one did. You know, like I think they refresh it. They're very clever. I mean, the Bond franchise assimilates whatever is currently popular. I don't know I'm sure you've noticed this. You know, like the Roger Moore ones, for example. You know, whenever blaxploitation movies were very fashionable in the early 70s, you had Live and Let Die. Kung Fu movies, you had you know, Man with the Golden Gun. Jaws was big, so they call a guy Jaws and have a shark.
Yeah.
And then Star Wars and Moonraker. So like
Moonraker,
yeah. And what they'll do next is they'll assimilate whatever is currently fashionable and they'll thrive, as they always do.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they had Jason Bourne that was big in the 2000s, and I think that very much shaped Daniel Craig's like view of Bond.
It just went on too long, didn't it? Yeah.
It did, yeah, and I think he wasn't really up for it, and like I never really rated him as a Bond actor. He just seemed kind of miserable and pouty and too sullen to be playing
that. Ginger Bond as well. I mean, even as a ginger, I'm offended by it. You know?
Yeah, sorry. I miss Pierce Brosnan. I feel like he just had that great balance of all the different Bond traits. You know, he was definitely a little bit lighthearted. He didn't take it too seriously, but like he was, you know, ready when he needed to be for the dramatic scenes.
Yeah.
And he just, I think he gave you a great balance of all the different sort of Bonds that had come before him.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
you're in such a retro kick right now, aren't you? It's funny, like you're talking.
I really am, yeah. It's weird, like, you know, I can recognize, like, you know, Sean Connery was the super masculine Bond. Roger Moore was the campy kind of like comedic relief Bond, who was just like a kind of, you know, lighthearted, fun version of it. Timothy Dalton was super serious and super like brooding and dark. And then you got Brosnan, who was like the balance of all of those that came before him. He seemed to embody all of that. And then you got Daniel Craig, who was just like zero fun. There's no fun happening here. It's all serious spy work. It's like,
imagine a wee guy going to see a Daniel Craig Bond coming out and trying to play at Bond with his pals. What would he do? You know, he'd just cry in the shower. I mean, what does Daniel Craig's Bond do?
Bond's supposed to enjoy what he does. Like he loves being a spy. He's a womanizer. Like that's, you know, you can say it's sexist or whatever, but that's what the character is. That's what makes him timeless.
Can I just say in Roger Moore's defense for his toughness, I read an interview with Lee Marvin, and Lee Marvin did a movie with him back in the 70s, and Marvin apparently was quite a nasty drunk, and whenever he had a drink in him, he would start fights, and Roger Moore beat the hell out of him. I love that. And Lee Marvin is the guy talking about this, and he said, I thought he was a kind of English softy and everything. He said, that guy has a jaw made of granite. I'll never make that mistake again.
I've said this before. I said this in my video when I ranked all the different Bonds. I've got a real soft spot for Roger Moore.
He's my favorite Bond. I love Roger Moore.
I know he was lumbered with like really campy scripts and stuff, but when he was given a chance to play it serious, like Spy Who Loved Me was pretty like cold and businesslike. Yeah. That was a good version of Bond. And I think he could actually do it. I just think he leaned into that campy sort of humor a bit too much, and it just ran away with him. And he hung in there too long. Like it was 57, 58, I think, when he did his last one. It's like, that's too old to be doing.
It was getting a big. He had a sort of Tory MP look by the end, didn't he? It was a big.
Very, very leathery. Like, yeah, you know, he'd had a lot done, and it was just like, nah, you shouldn't. Bond's not meant to be like that. But yeah, I do like him as Bond. I liked his portrayal of it. Anyway, I'm gonna go down a rabbit hole there. The next one was Daniel Monroe, who says, "Yes, drinker, can't make tonight. Looking forward to catching up on this. Hope you, Mr. Miller, and the guys have a chat. In chat, have a banging night. Cheers." Well, I think we did. It's been fun.
What a nice message.
Unhinged says, "The drinker and Mark Millar, wet dreams do come true."
I hope nobody's got off on this. That's my worst nightmare, actually. If somebody's actually got off on
it. To be honest with me, man, I'm just glad that it's dark outside and it's not like super hot now. Because honestly, I was fucking dying at the start of this. I was proper.
I've got a meeting in London tomorrow, and I'm absolutely dreading it. London's 41 degrees tomorrow.
Yeah,
and the human body is like 37 degrees. You know,
Scottish people are not designed to survive above 25. Yeah. We just can't do it. And yeah, I'm heading off to Florida in about 10 days. I'm going off to a convention over there. It's height of summer over there, and it's just like humidity 100%, temperature fucking 45 degrees or whatever every day. Yeah, I'm just going to die, or I'm going to come back like 20 pounds lighter than when I was there.
What amazes me about Florida is there's people actually working there. Like when I the rare occasions I've been to Florida, I'm like, how can a human? It's like being on Mars. How can a human survive this, right? Yeah. And then you see some guy and he's like fixing a car and all that. And it's like, how can you actually do your job in this weather? Like humans weren't supposed to be here. You know? It's
when I see fat people as well, like guys who are like 300 pounds or whatever, and they're just like happy as Larry. It's like, how are you even alive? I'm dying right now. That's crazy, man. Dash Attack says, "I really like Jupiter's Legacy on Netflix, and even got volume 1 of the original. Was really disappointed Netflix cancelled it because I find it to be a very mature take on superhero idealism. Is there any hope of a revival?"
I think, it's funny. Jupiter's was one of those things. It was a shame because there was so many great people involved in it. There was some really brilliant, like Stephen DeKnight and all that, but it just didn't work out. It was one of those things where it just didn't come together as well as we wanted. For 13 days out of 14, it was the #1 show in the world, which is awesome. You think that's cool, but it just, people didn't see it through enough to have a second season. We are going to come back into it, but later, and we're going to come to it via another franchise that's related called Super Crooks, a thing about supervillains. And we're going to re-enter Jupiter's later down the line. That's the plan. That's the Netflix plan for it. Because it's my favourite story I've ever done. Like, Jupiter's Legacy is my Lord of the Rings for superheroes. It's mental. Like, the whole thing's totally mental when you see it all. So it goes to places I've never been before. It's 6 volumes. And I love it. I'm really, really happy with it. That and Magic Order are my 2 favourite projects in my
Night King 01 says, "What was your reaction to the Wanted movie when it came out? Did you have any input in it at all? Since it's an adaptation name only."
Well, what they did was they basically used the first 2 issues and the ending, but the middle bit they didn't use because it was very superhero-y. And it's funny. I mean, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. I mean, it often did its own thing a little bit with the looms and all that kind of stuff. But I'll tell you a funny thing that you would never believe now. But back in 2006, when that movie was getting put together, one of the heads of Universal said to me, "Look, we can't do the superhero stuff in it because I think this superhero bandwagon's about to go. I think it's about to finish." And that was in 2006. And it had about 6 or 7 years by that point, and people were like, "Okay, this is probably winding up now." So they didn't want to risk doing a superhero-related thing, which is crazy to think.
Damn, man. Yeah, it's funny. Back 2006, and they were like, "Yeah, the bubble's going to burst." Little did they know. Stephen Bobo says, "Mark, you do a really good job of writing Superman or Superman-like stories. My question is, what is the secret of writing great stories about this character or this archetype?"
I think loving it is something, you know, like, I mean, all I ever wanted to do since I was a kid was write Superman. Like, I love the character. And I don't know what it is, the way some people love Spider-Man and some people love Batman or Han Solo or whatever. Superman was just my thing. So I actually get a buzz out of literally typing the words, you know, when I was writing the story. So I wrote Superman Red Sun, and I was so delighted. It's the biggest Superman graphic novel ever and everything. And I just think, well, okay, I've done it, you know, I've no great desire to go back to it because I feel as if, okay, what am I going to do? Write the second biggest or whatever, you know, like I'm happy. I did a good job on it. I'd always wanted to write that book and I'm happy with it on my shelf, you know. And I'd be kind of almost scared to do it now. I think I'd have performance anxiety with Superman now because I almost love it too much. I've got Christopher Reeve's cape in my office. You know, I've got the stuffed cat. You know, the cat that Superman rescues from a tree in Superman the movie? I've got that dead cat in my office. And it's like, I just love Superman too much to revisit it, I think.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, another one for Drew from Comics Elite says, Mark, love your work and it's only gotten better. King of Spies is fantastic and Prodigy, the Icarus Society is number 2 is just as fantastic. Keep kicking ass.
Oh, that's nice. Tell them thanks very much.
Just Jerome around says, I'm a fellow Scot as well from sunny Gurrock. Mark Millar, your Marvels 1984 and the Masters of Doom was absolutely phenomenal.
Cool.
Cannon Folderall, Scottish intensifies, deploy the tartan lads, Hail Drinker and Miller. Yet another response podcast says, greetings Drinker, we just finished a critique of the Nolan Batman films thanks to you, EFAP and Southpaw, and cheers and here's some drinking money. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. And
awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot to say about the Nolan Batman films.
It's funny, I've never rewatched them. When did you last watch the Nolan Batman films?
So I rewatched The Dark Knight Rises about a year ago for a review of it, but it's been a while for the other two, definitely.
Batman Begins is an absolute masterpiece, isn't it? It's so good. I think it's such an underrated film that people kind of almost memory hold that one. They remember the Joker movie, but I think that, you know, all that stuff with Bruce Wayne training around the world and Ra's al Ghul, the little sleight of hand and everything, it's a perfect movie. I love it.
I think what I appreciate about Batman Begins is like Gotham actually looks like Gotham City. When you get to like Dark Knight Rises, it's just New York basically, and that's such a shame because like I feel like Gotham City is a character in its own right. It's like so atmospheric. It's so it's that 1940s view of what the 2000s was going to look like. You know, like loads of Gothic architecture and stuff like that. It's so interesting, but you'd never quite got it in like the Nolan trilogy. I get that he was going for a more realistic view, but just always.
You know, it's funny you say that because I really appreciated the realism of Gotham City because I grew up reading like Marshall Rogers' Batman in the comics, right? And when I was about 8, and I loved the fact that Batman looked like he was in a real place. He was in a real city, so he was a really odd thing in a world that I understood. The same as Superman was kind of like that. Like Superman's metropolis was essentially New York, really, you know. So it wasn't Art Deco or anything like this. And I kind of loved that we'd seen Tim Burton do his, you know, Gothic Gotham City, you know. So I kind of loved the realism in Nolan's. I think that was quite exciting. I hadn't seen it before. So, you know, I see the merits of both. You know?
I'm really torn in between with those two ideas because I totally get that the whole aesthetic of the Nolan movies was to make it more believable, more grounded and stuff. Like totally fine because after the Schumacher movies, like you needed that. But I feel like Gotham is such an atmospheric setting for a story. When you see it in the comic books, it's like all dingy back alleyways, and it's like this like 1940s, 1930s view of like what the future's going to look like. It's all like Art Deco, but faded and decayed and stuff. I love that. It looks so cool, but it never quite got brought forward in the Nolan movies. So yeah, it wasn't quite what I was looking for, but I can totally get why other people were happy with it.
But my perfect Gotham, I think, would be that 1970s New York. You know, the idea that it's an alley you're scared to walk down, it's like Taxi Driver and everything. You know, I think the Martin Scorsese-ness of it. For me, my favourite Batman story ever, like a lot of people, is Frank Miller and Dave Mazzucchelli's Batman Year One. Don't know if you've read it, but it's essentially just Batman in a skin-tight suit in the real world, trying not to get killed, trying to help people and not get killed. And I'd kind of love to see a Batman movie like that where he's wearing no armor, you know, he's just wearing like a tights and, you know, like something you'd make at home.
Yeah.
And there's something so cool about that. I'd love to see Batman move the way Batman would move. Like when he's wearing armor, you can't see him do all the Jackie Chan stuff and everything. I'd love to see him, everything he trains for 18 years around the world to do, I'd love to see him cut loose and be in a costume that he's actually kind of mobile in. And that's my one tiny flaw with the Nolan movies, as they gave him that armor again. I'd love to see Batman in something more spandexy, you know?
Yeah. It was very obvious in the Burton movies where it's like he couldn't turn his head properly, so he just had to spin his whole body around to look at things.
If you wanted to beat him, you just have to stand to one side and hit him with
armor. I know you're a bit short on time, so I'll just do a couple more and then finish up.
Yeah, better.
Night King 01 says, Mark, I remember there used to be a team of writers who you included that gave input into the Marvel films for the first few years. Why did that go away?
The original bunch of guys that I was with was Brian Bendis, Joe Quesada, and Dan Buckley, who was publisher as well. That was it when I was there. I just went off and did my own thing. You know, like that was about the time I was leaving Marvel. It was about 2007-ish and into 2008. And you know what I did as well? I think I probably always told the truth too. So anything really stupid, I would say that's rubbish. You know, like that's terrible. And I was always really honest. And I remember thinking, they've flown me all the way to Los Angeles. I'm going to tell the truth, you know, as opposed to say everything's awesome. And I remember somebody taking me aside at lunchtime and saying, listen, you've got to stop telling the truth so much. You have to play the game a little bit, you know. So I think I probably, they probably wouldn't have been happy having me long term anyway. I was never going to be a kind of yes man. Right?
Yeah, stop being honest. Master Puppet says, Drinker and Mark, what are your thoughts on Ripperverse?
Very exciting. I mean, it's funny. I don't kind of get the controversy. You know, I don't know if you've seen this, but it's a guy who crowdfunded a comic and he's made close to 2 million very quickly inside a few days.
Incredible.
And he's on track to make 3 million. And I was unfamiliar with the guy. He's a rapper and he's a writer and everything, you know, and he seems a very interesting guy. Eric D. July, he's called. And I didn't know him until last week and I saw this all blow up. And a lot of people are kind of angry and everything, you know, but I just think fair play, you know, I mean, to go out there and put yourself out and create your own thing, try and get your own business going and make a success of it, that's so hard to do, you know, and I've got total respect for anyone that goes out and does that. He seems, you know, like he's making all the right moves. And comics is in this weird place, like they say, you know, it's every 20 years or so, there's a big seismic shift in comics. And every 40 years or so, there's a huge change in terms of how they're distributed and so on. And I think we're in that point just now where things are going to be very different. There's crowdfunding, there's digital, there's comic stores, there's bookstores. There's all these ways to sell it now that we didn't have in the past. I love seeing people just trying stuff like this. And for a guy to make 3 million from his first comic, well done, man.
No, I think it's awesome. I mean, I've had him on my channel before for like Open Bar. He's a really nice guy. Really good story. All he's interested in, no messaging, no politicizing or anything like that.
Right.
And I'm so happy that this has done so well. Like he's well over 2 million now.
Right.
It's well beyond anything he'd expected, from what I understand. And I just think it's fantastic. I wish him the best of luck with this. I love that idea of like, well, the mainstream comics industry is not going to support me. Fuck it, I'm just going to do it myself then. And
I love that. You know, it's funny because I grew up hearing all these really sad stories about comic people being ripped off. You know, like Jack Kirby and all these guys, you know, the guys who co-created all this stuff. They never got the recognition they deserved. They never got the money they deserved. You know, the big companies made all the dough. And this goes all the way back through the 50s, the 40s, all the way back really to this beginning of the last century. I think the last guys who really made cash from the creations was like Edgar Rice Burroughs, who was absolutely minted from Tarzan. But they learned pretty quickly, the publishers just started ripping off all these young guys who weren't that business savvy. So I love it when I hear of a creator making dough, because I've heard so many sad stories. It's brilliant to hear the good stories that is.
No, absolutely. The Just Jerome Around asks, Mark, what inspired you to write Reborn, and will there be a follow-up?
Weirdly, I don't have a plan for a follow-up for that one. I created it just before. It was the last thing I created before I sold the company to Netflix. And it's in the process of being turned into a film by Sandra Bullock, weirdly, just now. She wants to star in it as well. The idea for it is really simple, and I love a good, simple idea. The idea is, where do we go when we die? And I thought it'd be pretty cool to tell a story of, and it's not heaven or hell or anything like that. It's basically just going through into a Lord of the Rings style world, when you're dead. And depending on whether you've been a good person or not, you end up in one side of this place or the other side. So it starts with an old lady dying in her bed, and then 10 minutes later, you've got this big fantasy adventure with this young woman she's reborn as in the next life, and she's looking for her husband who died 20 years before. And has he moved on? Has he met somebody else? And everything. It's a very universal idea. You don't have to be a Christian or whatever, to get it. Anybody in the world doesn't know really what happens after you die, and that's what the story's about. And it worked. I think it was a fun story. I worked with a great artist called Greg Capullo on it. It was fun, but I've no plans to do more.
Okay. JB says, Mark, I've loved your work since Authority. How are things between you and Grant Morrison?
Well, I was really close pals actually with Grant in the 90s. Like when I was 18 and he was 28, I interviewed him for a magazine, and we became really pals for years and everything. And as happens with writers, writers drift apart. It's like, I think you almost can't have too many creative people in one room. I think that all my pals are kind of like in the regular world. Like all my pals do regular jobs, and I don't really hang out with anyone from the entertainment industry, which is quite weird, I guess, because I work in the entertainment industry, but all my buddies do sort of regular jobs, and I never talk about my work outside of it as well. I just go and have a laugh with my pals down the pub and everything, so like, yeah, I think like in the 90s though, I can't think of anyone who was more encouraging and, helpful than Grant. He was doing the job that I was sort of learning at the time, as a teenager. And it was amazing to kind of just get the advice that I got, for somebody to come from the same city as me who was doing the job I wanted to do was invaluable. It was great.
No, that's awesome. Claudia Rogajan says, thank you for giving us Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury in The Ultimates, Mark. Were you surprised when Sam Jackson actually took on the role?
Well, there's a funny story behind it, actually. Like what happened was I based in Ultimate X-Men, I put a black Nick Fury instead of the traditional white Nick Fury into the book, because I based him slightly on Colin Powell. It was actually more Colin Powell than Sam Jackson, because he was doing the same job. He was the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., and this was the guy sort of in charge of America's defences at the time. This was back in summer 2000s. And it was actually the artist Brian Hitch who drew him as Samuel L. Jackson. And it was funny. What I didn't realise is that Sam Jackson is a massive comic book fan. So Sam Jackson went into Golden Apple Comics in Los Angeles and was like, why the hell is my face all over all these Marvel comics, And he got in. Sam's a really cool guy, and he got in touch, and he was given a deal by Marvel. They were giving him a deal to play Nick Fury because he was perfect for the part. He obviously looked like him, but also he embodied the thing really brilliantly too. And I remember on Kingsman,
yeah,
I met Sam was on Kingsman, and I missed him the first day I was down, and I left him a little note, and it said, "Thanks for not suing us for using your face in the Avengers." And he sent me a little note that said, "Thanks for the 9-picture deal, motherfucker." So, so it was great, Sam's an amazing guy. I absolutely love him. I can't believe he's in his 70s. Like I've sat with him, and
I know
he looks like a teenager. Like
it doesn't make sense.
He has the movements of a guy about 18 or something like that. He's a really, really, he's in incredible condition.
No, he's a hell of a dude. Claudia Rogajan says, Mark, where did the idea for the evil Hulk in the Ultimates come from, especially the cannibalistic part, which was just crazy?
That was good fun. What I did was I made it the Jekyll and Hyde thing, So what I did with the Ultimates was I took all the characters back to their core essence. So Captain America is a social conservative from 1945. In the modern day, Tony Stark's a libertarian. The Hulk is the monstrous id of Bruce Banner. So Bruce Banner's a vegan. Bruce Banner's a vegan. So the Hulk's a cannibal. So like I just went crazy with it, and I made him the opposite. He was the dark side of Bruce Banner, which is all. It was really fun. So when he'd fight people, he'd kill them and then eat them afterwards and everything. I was just doing any crazy stuff that would be fun to do with the character.
No, that's fair enough. I'll do one last one.
I was going to say I can hear trouble upstairs. I'm showing the children the original Planet of the Apes movies right now, which they're absolutely loving. So they've just finished Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and tonight they're doing the fourth one. And I'm talking about the proper old school Planet of the Apes, of course.
Oh, nice. Well, do you want? Shall we finish up there then? Because I know you.
I could do one more. I can hear shouting, but like I'll head up in a second. I'll be 2 minutes. Okay. Right, we're good.
I'll give you one more, and that's our lot. There was one here about Superman. Where is it? Yeah, here's one. Tiger Stripe says, please ask Mark what an executive producer does. It's just a total mystery to me.
I remember as a kid always wondering that, because you'd always see it quite prominently, and it can mean two things. It can mean you created something and your agent has managed to get you a credit as an exec producer, and you maybe get another chunk of money, maybe another 30% on what you got paid, for the rights for something. Or it can mean you get super involved. And the first thing I did, it was the former. And then it was the latter, because the beauty of creating something is you don't have to sell it. So whenever you sell the rights to a studio, it can come with certain conditions, and you being heavily involved can be those conditions. So the executive producer can be 0 to 100, depending on how interested you are in, being a part of the process, which I love, because one thing I learned from Alan Moore is that, those things were out of his hands. He'd no control over those projects, and some of the greatest comic books in the world get turned into mediocre movies. So I wanted to make sure the stuff was protected. If anybody was going to screw this up, it was going to be me.
Yeah, well, that's the way to look at it. But yeah, like I know you've obviously got stuff that you need to be taken care of now, but I just want to say, like, Mark, it's been fantastic to talk to you tonight. I appreciate you giving like a couple hours of your time. And it's been awesome to just hear your stories about like how this stuff happens, how all these movies and all these adaptations come to be. I think everyone in chat's really appreciated like hearing your point of view as well. It's been great, man.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for having me, Drinker. I mean, I love the podcast. You and I have been talking and everything. Like it's great. The only downside is I've now heard this one. Like I normally look forward to your new one, but now it's just me. It seems rubbish that it's just me. I wish it's somebody else on.
You can skip this one, it'd be all right. But no, like, thank you, Mark Millar. Honestly, it's been great to talk to you tonight. I really appreciated your time, and thank you for doing this. It's been fantastic.
No, it's all the best, and good luck with the book. I'm looking forward to your book.
Oh, cheers, man. I will get a copy sent off to you. It'll be winging its way to you shortly.
Great. All the best then, Drinker. See you soon.
All right. Cheers, man. Thank you.
Catch you later.
All right. 'Tis but me. All right. So I know there's a few super chats still outstanding, so I will do my best to answer them. And if they're addressed specifically to Mark, I genuinely apologize. We tried to get through as many as we could. So, what's the next one? Narwhal Brooks says, Critical Drinker doesn't look like a drunk. Cheers, fellas. I mean, I am pretty drunk right now. I'm not going to fucking lie. I'm struggling to actually read the super chats right now. That's what a good old dose of wild turkey will do for you. Good stuff. David Coots said, my favorite YouTuber and my favorite comic book author. Indeed. I can't speak to the YouTuber part, but speaking to Mark was fucking great. Really nice guy. What says, we'd love to hear your review of the Terminal List. Well, you won't have to wait too much longer because I've written the script for it. I just need to edit it all together into a half-decent video. So, yeah, overall, I really like it, though. Mobile Crusader says, I really wish they had just stuck with the Osama bin Laden type Mandarin for Iron Man 3. It would have been way better. Yep, absolutely. I very much agree. They were building him up to be a genuinely intimidating, interesting villain. Then he just sacrificed it all for a bit of comedy. So, yeah, whatever. Night King 01 says, question, did you think it was a missed opportunity for the Red Skull to return in Civil War film because Zemo killed Vasily in the beginning of the film? No, I was all right because Red Skull, in the context of the movies, he had been kind of zapped off to a different dimension when he touched the Tesseract. So I was fine with him showing up in Endgame. That was all right for me. Decay79 says, love your work, both of you. Cheers, man. Thank you. Tiger Stripe says, please ask Mark just what an executive producer does. Oh, yeah, I just asked him that. Andrew Wilson says, never thought of it like that. Neither did I. Thomas Wright says, Drinker, you'd like the song Drunken Dwarves. Well, who wouldn't, really? Samael527 says, holy crap, Mark Millar, your comics were my childhood. Ultimates, Old Man Logan, Civil War. Congrats, Drinker, for scoring this epic guest. And all props to Mr. Millar. Yeah, Mark's been fantastic. I'm really pleased that he was able to join me tonight. Samael527 says, what was your inspiration and thought process when putting your spin on the Avengers for the Ultimates? Specifically, Thor, Cap, Tony, Hulk, Giant, and Nick Fury. Yeah, unfortunately, Mark can't answer that. I am sorry about that one. Nathan Cassidy says, the problem with these stories, they're not about political issues. They're just straight up propaganda. Agree on the talent, though. Yeah, that's all they are. Just telling you what to think. Jilly Writes Comics says, tired of woke comics, please check out Galactic Rodents of Mayhem. There are other underground comics out there in the same vein as Rippaverse. There you go. It can be done. Nathan Cassidy says, the lunatics are not the way out. They are, however, being publicly humiliated and giving an opportunity to a parallel economy. Well, that's why you've got the Rippaverse right now. Samael says, last request, make Mark discuss the unfunnies. Sorry, missed the chance. Apologies. Tom says, loved Ultimates 1 and 2 and your run on Fantastic Four, but hated Nemesis. You did too good a job making me hate the villain. Love you, Miller. Hopefully he sees this. Common Sense says, I enjoyed your Reborn fantasy comic, Mr. Millar. How is the Netflix adaptation coming along? I'm confident it's going to be better than Rings of Power. I mean, to be fair, like me sitting on the pan and just shitting for an hour is going to be better than Rings of Power. But that is the world that we live in. Next one is... Jack White, Nancy Flores, who gave me a super sticker. Thank you very much. Jack White says, Drinker, Mark, some anime recommendation for you. Yu Yu Hakusho, My Hero Academia, Black Clover, Bangu, Stray Dogs, One Piece, Bleach, Demon Slayer. So many. If only there was enough time. Hulk says, has Mark Millar heard of the Rippaverse? He has indeed, yes, and he's very supportive of it. Nathaniel Updike says, Mark, what comics have you been reading lately? I don't know, and we'll never know, sadly. And Jack White says, some more anime recommendations, The Seven Deadly Sins, Hunter x Hunter, Space Battleship Yamato, that's fucking awesome. Cowboy Bebop, Full Metal Alchemist, and Brotherhood. Yeah, Cowboy Bebop is really good. Common Sense says, what happens to Empress? It ends on a cliffhanger with the Queen Emporia happy she's with a normal guy, but it reveals that Dane is not normal. So what happened? Oh, sorry, Mark, can't answer that for you, man. I appreciate the super chat, but he's not here. Matt Hep says, Miller loved Jupiter's Legacy. Shame they didn't have a second season. Tangent question, what's your thoughts on League of Superheroes? I don't know. I've not seen League of Superheroes, and I don't know what Mark's going to say. Sorry, man. Motolicious says, seriously, did Thor find himself? We need to know. Yeah. Fuck the Thor movies, honestly. Garbage. Michael Hing says, anything you wish to say about Ditko? We'll never know. Sorry, man. Hulk25 says, I love Mark Millar's Ultimate Hulk versus Wolverine. Superior Kickass and Super Crooks. Hail Mark Millar and the Drinker. Love from Ireland. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. Diano says, two great Scots. Great interview. Great Scott! Thanks, man. Motalicious says, Jupiter's Legacy was plagiarized Invincible, but less entertaining, and it took forever to get to the point. Jupiter's plagiarism. I couldn't tell you, man. I don't know. Casey Bondurant says, progressives love the Drinker. Fact, I've checked. Mark, Kickass was the most honest psychological comic work that I've ever read. You're amazing. There you go. Hope he sees it. And yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Pig Riser gave me £5, so thanks, man. Matt Nielsen says, what do you think of the movie Selfless? I don't know. Sorry, I haven't seen it. Mike Irish says, hey, Mark, I gave my priest a copy of Old Man Logan because he liked the Logan movie and he was blown away by it. I'll give him American Jesus next. Well, hopefully enjoys that too. Wukong says, hi, Mark. I'm a big fan of Kick-Ass. The movie and comic is a nice bit of nostalgia for me. What was the process of making that comic series? Yeah, I'm sorry I can't answer on Mark's behalf, mate. Apologies. Crady says, tell Princess Tilda I've saved the world. Nice. John Smith says, you ever seen Adventures in Babysitting with Elizabeth Shue? It's actually pretty good, and Shue was such a fox. Still is, actually. Yeah, she's still got it, man. Elizabeth Shue. Night King 01 says, got to bring Mark back. Well, hopefully one day we will. But yeah, he was a great guest. It was really cool to talk to him. Claudia Rogajan says, dang, he was knocking those beers back like water. Well, he's Scottish. What can I say? Aaron Klein says, hail Drinker, have you seen the TV set written and directed by Jake Kasdan, starring David Duchovny, Sigourney Weaver, and Ewan Grufford? Great yet sad. No, that's a good cast as well. Chris Grauer has given me a thumbs up, so thanks, man. Jack White says, you don't have to watch all of them at once. Start with Yu Yu Hakusho. It's one of my all-time favorites. Nice recommendation. Thank you. Emerald Demas says, hail Drinker, great show. I'd love to see your review of Terror on the Prairie and The Boys Season 3. I'll send $100 if you get Tatiana on the live stream. Well, you know, she's a bit shy when it comes to this kind of thing because, you know, she's in witness protection because she's murdered people. But yeah, we don't talk about that. But yeah, I will definitely do a review of Terror on the Prairie because I'm interested to watch it. Wolfbane Fire says, any chance you're reviewing The Boys Season 3? Honestly, I'm a bit fucking burned out with The Boys. I don't really want to watch it. Yeah. You can get through this, Drinker. You can do it. I'm pretty drunk. I'm not going to fucking lie to you. Yeah. That wild turkey, it kicks in. Love your content, Drinker. Thank you, man. I love your content as well. Cheers, mate. What's this one? Correction, the guy Zemo killed in the beginning of Civil War was the villain in comic because he was possessed by Red Skull through the Tesseract. Well, I didn't know that. I can only go on what I've seen in the movie, but yeah, Zemo did indeed kill him, so it was fair play. Yeah, what was this one? No. Cannibal Hulk still baffles me, but dang, it was entertaining. Plus, Hulk is the horniest there is. It's a really funny line courtesy of Mark Millar. Horniest. I mean, yeah, when you're massive and angry, you got to fuck. What can I say? Yeah, the TV show is a bit weak. Season 2, I could already feel the direction it was going, and that's partly why I don't want to watch Season 3 because I can just tell what it's going to be. Yeah. What was this one? Tokenized Black Noir put the nail in the coffin for me. Yeah, Black Noir was cool. You know, even Homelander had a bit of respect for him, and yeah, it's a bit sad to see where it's going. Did you watch Star Trek Strange New Worlds? No, I haven't, because I've heard such mixed things about it. Like watching Robert Meyer Burnett's reviews of it, episode by episode, he's gone on an absolute emotional roller coaster. And by the end, he seemed to not like it. So I just thought, fuck it. It's not worth my time. Yeah, I've lost my love for new Star Trek for sure. Yeah, did you have any thoughts on Ghostbusters Afterlife? Yeah, I've done a review of it. Although I've said before, I think my review was probably more positive than it should have been. My review, or sorry, my opinion of that movie has kind of gone down over time. And yeah, I consider it to be a little bit shit now. It's not as bad as Ghostbusters 2016, but it's a pretty lazy cash grab, playing on nostalgia sequel. Thoughts on Farscape? This is going to be my last one of the night. Farscape is fucking brilliant. Everyone should watch it. If you didn't watch it back in the day, find it now and watch it, because Farscape was a great show. Great cast, really good storylines. There were some goofy episodes, but overall it was pretty fucking good. So yeah, I loved it. Yeah, amazed how much work the MCU took from the Ultimate Universe. They're still taking from it. Millar and Bendis really made something great. Sad it ended terribly with Ultimatum. I mean, you know, that's what the MCU is now, just plagiarizing stuff. Steal. Anyway, I'm really drunk. I'm going to sign off now. It's been fantastic hanging with all you guys. I can't see the screen properly, so I don't know what you're saying to me. But yeah, I'm going to be doing open bar on Thursday night. We're going to be talking about Thor and the Terminal List and Resident Evil being absolutely fucking garbage. So yeah, join us on Thursday. And we've got some good guests. I think we're going to have Razorfist, because I've been talking to him for a while, and I think he's available to do this. And we're probably going to have Tyrone Magnus as well, who's a bit of a fan of like what I do. So the two of them, and plus whoever else wants to join us in the meantime. So yeah, that's what we've got coming up on Thursday night. So I want to say thanks to you guys. I hope you've enjoyed me talking to Mark. I'm sorry he wasn't able to answer every super chat that came through. I know that he had to bail out, but you know, the guy's got shit going on. So what can I say? But he was a great guest. I really appreciated him coming on tonight. And yeah, hope you enjoyed it. So thanks to my mods as well for keeping the peace on this one and doing their usual great work. You guys are fucking great at what you do. And yeah, for now, I guess that's all that I've got for today. So I'm gonna go away now.